Sup, my fellas, don't forget to leave feedback and enjoy the story. There are mountains in front of us. We see the entrance to a cave. Someone calls someone a fool and asks if he really thought he could escape. We see the face of a young man. He is asked where the ancient relic is. The guy's arms are cut off. He calls his interlocutor an idiot and asks if he would tell us about it himself if he were in his place. There are two characters in front of us who are clearly villainous in appearance. One of them calls the armless guy an arrogant bastard. The second one stops his comrade and says that they need to contact the main squad. This man brings a shiny crystal to his mouth. He says that they managed to catch the Northern Phantom and asks to confirm their coordinates. The intercom announces that the coordinates have been confirmed and reinforcements will arrive soon. Two warriors stand in front of their opponent. One of them says that he is incredibly stubborn. It is hard to believe that he is still holding on, despite his severed arms. The man does not understand why the Northern Phantom needs the relic that the Emperor is after. His comrade suggests that their enemy does not need a reason. He is simply getting on their nerves. They have suffered terribly because of him. This character suggests that they have some fun until the main squad arrives. He wants to pay them back for all the suffering they have endured. The armless young man looks down. One of his enemies takes hold of the hilt of his sword and says that the Northern Phantom should take a deep breath. They will torment him until he begs for death. The second warrior suggests that they decide who will start tormenting the enemy first. They only have a short time. One of the villains tosses a coin into the air and declares that if it lands on heads, he will go first. White, even teeth sink into something. We see that the Northern Phantom, whose eyes are burning with rage, is biting into his arm, which seems to have just grown back. He thinks that he will never sit back. We see his glowing eyes up close. The young man thinks that he is the first unsuccessful awakening in the Draker family, and his name is Zeke. We see the young man's hand. Because he was born into a family of Dragonslayers with a body that cannot use aura, he was unable to awaken, which seems impossible to a knight. He was thrown out of his family home like some kind of trash. We see a white glow against the mountains. This is why Zeke tried everything to become stronger and survive. The young man runs forward at full speed. Someone once said, if you only strive for strength, then in the end you will have nothing left. We see hands tossing a coin. It lies under the palm. The coin opens, and we see that it has an image of a dragon. However, the hero thinks that all this is complete nonsense. One of his opponents is happy that the coin came up heads. He doesn't notice that his comrade no longer has a head on his shoulders. Zeke's eyes are filled with rage. He thinks that those who already have power say this. The young man looks at his opponent, who holds his sword out in front of him. The two blades clash. Zeke seems to kill his enemy. He thinks that the weak will be crushed by the strong, who will take everything they can from them. This is the truth of this world. We see the young man's eyes. Now we see his hand. A whole squad of enemies approaches him. Zeke thinks that it seems that he will not be able to escape. The enemies cannot believe that he has just gotten his hand back. In front of us are two scoundrels. One of them asks what kind of abomination this irregular is. The second replies that if you cut off his head, he will probably die. Zeke looks resolutely at the enemies. We see his three opponents. Zeke is fighting the entire squad. Many swords are stuck in his back, but it seems that he has dealt with all his enemies. The guy curses. Zeke covers his mouth, from which blood flows. The hero raises his hand. He thinks that he seems to be finished. Blood soaks the young man's cloak. Zeke realizes that he was unable to take revenge, but he managed to steal the relic that the Emperor was hunting for, so he will not die in vain. In front of us is the object that the guy apparently means. Blood from his head flows onto the ground. Zeke asks for forgiveness from a certain Alicia. The figurine that the hero holds in his hands begins to glow. The yellow glow becomes very bright. We see blue bars that inform us that the hero's strong will is capable of awakening an ancient power. The soul of an ancient dragon is imprinted in the will of the one who persists. A human figure appears behind Zeke. A ghostly head of a girl is visible behind the young man's head. We see several more windows. It is reported that an urgent measure is being taken. Zeke Draker is asked if he agrees. The hero thinks that he is going to die soon, and that is why he is seeing all sorts of nonsense. However, the question about consent is repeated. The hero answers that the one who asks can do as he wants. Blood runs down Zeke's face. More windows report that the consent of the awakening has been received. The irreversible promised power is activated. The countdown begins. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The boy rubs his chin in bewilderment. He is trying to understand what happened. After he regained consciousness, he began to look exactly like this. We see the boy's hand. He thinks that he seems to have returned to the past. The boy reaches out to the image of the dead warrior. It is very difficult to believe, but he still clearly remembers how a sword is thrust into him. The boy is lying on the bed. The place he is in seems very familiar to him. This is the cradle. In front of us is a round building. It is reported that we see the Draker family training facility cradle. We see people and dragons hovering above them. The Draker family of Dragonslayers is one of the 3 great transcendental families. Tarakan Draker is a hero who saved the continent by slaying the evil dragon Bahamut during the war 1,000 years ago. In front of us is a face with eyes that emit an eerie light. The descendants of that hero founded the Draker family. We see a group of warriors. All members of the Draker family have the blessing of aura. Perhaps this is because their ancestor is Tarakan Draker. In front of us are 2 crossed swords. Therefore, these people have the ability to awaken their high-level aura and become knights. A boy lies with his head in his hands. He thinks that everyone except him has an aura. A notification appears that the administration system is rebooting. The boy raises his head from the pillow. He is standing in front of the bed. The youth does not understand whether he heard correctly or not. The child's eyes widened in surprise as he heard one notification after another. Awakened soul confirmed. Confirmed, awakened soul is 100% attuned. Confirmed, the soul of the chosen awakened has received the will of the ancient dragon and completely merged with it. You have accessed part of the system. Greetings, Zeke Draker. Activating status window viewer. The young man stretched out his finger towards the windows hanging in front of him. He couldn't understand what was happening here. Did he somehow activate the relic? Another notification announced that the status window had opened. The low-rank administrator status window appeared. Name, Zeke Draker. Class, Healer. Title, one who has received the blessing of the ancient dragon. Class skills, Healing, Calm Mind, Energy Recovery, Heightened Senses. Skills, Precision Strike, C rank, /C rank, Critical Hit, D rank. Dragon skills, unable to display, requires 10 points to unlock. Current karma points, 0. The hero pierces the system window. In his mind, he states that he can do things like this. Now his fingers slide over the blue object. The boy realizes that he can also move around it. Zeke rubs his chin. He looks at the top of the information window. The hero's attention is drawn to the class data. The boy remembers the dragon language, which is not used in his time. His teacher told him about this. Zeke remembers the mentor standing with a club on her shoulder. She says that in ancient times, people divided themselves into classes depending on what they were good at. Each class trains in a special technique known as skills. If the hero's class is healer, then he can use the healing skill. Behind the boy, we see his mentor. The boy thinks that after he woke up, the woman worked on him until he lost his pulse. She says that healing can help the boy get through a lot. Zeke rubs his chin. He thinks that in any case, the status window says that he is already a healer and he should check it in practice. The young man raises his hand in front of him. He wants to make sure that what is written in the status window corresponds to reality. We see a young man in an officer's uniform. In his past life, Zeke became a healer when he was over 20, right after the etheric hall was opened. Streams of white energy rise around the boy's figure. We see his closed eyes. Now they are wide open. Zeke, smiling, raises his right hand. He realizes that his etheric hall is already open. We see the muscular back of the boy. Now he understands that despite the loss of his trained body, he has returned to the past with his skills and memories. The young man walks forward with a thoughtful expression. The boy understands that he is now in a much better position than before the regression. Zeke is sitting on the bed, smiling. In order to take advantage of the advantages, he must find out what is at his disposal. Someone asks Mr. Zeke from behind the door if he can come in. The young man puts his hand on his head. Someone from outside warns him not to even try to pretend that he is not in the room. The boy tries to remove the system windows, despite the fact that he has not read all the information that is contained there. The door opens slightly. The one behind it warns that he is entering the room. Zeke shouts loudly, begging him to wait. The one who entered declares that he cannot believe that the young man is not ready yet. In front of us is a bearded man with a monocle. It is reported that this is Decker, Zeke's only servant. He asks what the young man is thinking about. He seems to recognize the character. Smiling, the young man asks the man what he is not prepared for. The boy thinks to himself that Decker seems to not see the system windows hanging in front of him. The man's right eye shines angrily. He menacingly asks if Mr. Zeke is really asking him about this. The young man looks down. He remembers how scared he was of Decker when he was little. Even though he now has the brain of a 32-year-old man, he cannot get rid of this feeling of fear imprinted in his childish mind. A notification appears about the activation of the class skill Calm Mind. Blue sparks appear on the top of the young man's head. He realizes that all the anxiety has disappeared in an instant. We see an information window. Class skill Calm Mind. The user's mental state will not change. Regardless of the situation, the user will be able to remain calm. Zeke looks thoughtfully at the system window. He wonders if this is also a skill. In any case, it is very good that it is activated automatically. Decker, stretching out his hand, says that he has told the boy many times how important this event is. The man is standing in front of the bed. He sternly asks if Mr. Zeke is listening to him. The hero replies that, of course, he is. Most likely, Decker is talking about the evolutionary test Pankration. In front of us is a badly beaten young man. All Drakers are trained in the Cradle Training Center, starting at the age of 7. In front of us is a round building with octagonal towers at the edges. For 5 years, they undergo strict basic training. Instructors evaluate applicants every year in sword fighting and Pankration without rules. We see a fighter with clenched fists. Opponents are assigned by the instructor, but there are cases when the students themselves choose who to fight, provided that both agree. Another cadet holds a sword in front of him. Due to the lack of rules, some leave the fight with injuries or do not leave it at all. But since it is this competition that determines the class into which the students of the academy will be enrolled, the children have no choice but to fight with all their might. We see a mountain of candidates and a small number of the chosen ones, held in the hand of a man with a face hidden in shadow. In front of us is an arena. On a round platform stands a man who announces that today, as everyone knows, is the day of Pankration. Looking at the young people, he asks if everyone knows that this is the last component of the assessment. The students unanimously declare that they know this. It is announced that in front of us is the senior instructor Mark. It seems to him that all the students are in high spirits and suggests that on this occasion they begin the competition. The cadets do not seem to be at all amused, but they tell the instructor that they are ready. The hero, who is standing in the general formation, hears the comments of the young people standing nearby. It is Zeke. He is here again. He came after last year's humiliation. In his place, I would have run away. And this guy is a direct descendant. Zeke, naturally, is not happy to hear all this. Clouds float above the trees. Someone calls for Aaron and Goda to come forward. The young men who were called respond. The instructor raises his hand. He calls for the participants in the fight to get ready. The hand goes down. This is the signal for the start of the fight. One of the guys, running up, rushes at the other. A fist flies to the ear. A kick is delivered to the chin. One of the fighters lies face up in the arena. Zeke thinks that the outcome of the fight is clear. This is what happens when you take the wrong defensive position. An announcement sounds that Goda cannot fight and Aaron has won. The hero sighs, resting his head on his hand. He used to be very afraid of all this, but now the fighters he sees do not seem too dangerous to him. Zeke yawns, covering his mouth with his hand. We see a young man who, his eyes sparkling, warms up his hands. Mark is standing between the two young men. He asks if Zeke and Leon are ready for battle. Both boys say yes. The hero rubs his left eye with his fingers and thinks that his opponent simply has to be Leon. He looks at his opponent with enthusiasm. He asks the hero why he came here again. Wasn't last year enough for him? Zeke smiles. He thinks that none of this matters anymore. We see the badly beaten boy again. Someone calls him a parasite and demands that he beg for mercy if he wants to live. The boy apologizes to Mr. Leon Conrad and asks him to stop beating him. Zeke remembers that this boy was his opponent every year. The hero watches the boy negotiate with the instructor. Zeke is sure that he set it all up. His family believes that you need to be able to use dirty tricks to become a real Dragonslayer. In front of us is a smiling Leon. The hero asks himself why this piece of shit is his cousin. In front of us are 4 young men with glowing eyes. In the hero's past life, the 4 siblings in his direct line never had the chance to meet. However, there were over a dozen cousins who delighted in tormenting him. We see several boys kicking a young man on the ground. Leon declares that Zeke Draker should learn a lesson from him. The hero looks at his opponent. In front of us is the edge of the arena. Leon declares that the guy showed great courage by returning here after being beaten. Although, it is possible that he is simply inferior and did not immediately understand that he should not come here. Leon flicks his forehead, hinting at his cousin's stupidity. The class skill calm mind activates. Zeke, closing his eyes, rubs the back of his head. He thinks that it has been a long time since he had to listen to this fool. Zeke defiantly looks at his opponent and declares that he will not stand on ceremony with him if he does not stop acting like this. Leon roughly places his hand on the guy's head and asks what this inferior piece of shit can do to him. The next moment, he receives a very powerful blow to the jaw. It is reported that the critical strike skill has been activated. We see the description of this skill. Critical strike deals critical damage to the enemy. Can be cancelled in case of an unsuccessful hit. Leon, groaning in pain, holds his face. He states that it hurts a lot. Zeke looks at his hand, which emits streams of purple energy. He thinks that he just wanted to knock out the enemy, but the skill activated itself when he dealt him a normal blow. This means that the guy has very little control over his abilities yet. Someone loudly asks the hero what he did. The instructor sits down next to the victim and states that he has not yet announced the start of the battle. Zeke, sighing, asks if it is even appropriate to say ready, start on the battlefield. The guy's eyes glow with an ominous light. He states that the first strike has the advantage. Mark looks at the hero in amazement. The instructor, whose hand is on the student's back, is in a state of complete bewilderment. The hero, meanwhile, realizes that he felt the thirst for blood. Leon declares that he is completely fine. We see the surprised face of the instructor. The hero's cousin leans his trembling hand on the ground. He asks the instructor to start the fight. The guy declares that he is going to kill this inferior bastard. We see the faces of the two opponents. Zeke declares that Leon is too stupid and is not capable of learning his lesson. The instructor orders to get ready. There is a wave of the hand and the command to begin the fight. Leon rushes at the hero, who is standing in a defensive stance. Leon looks at his opponent in amazement. It seems that he has just felt fear of him. The opponents have approached to the distance of a fist fight. Leon realizes that his opponent's fists do not hurt him at all. The young man watches Zeke closely. He thinks that if he is on his guard, he will not pose any threat. If there's anything to be afraid of, it's the left counterpunch. We see a clenched fist. Leon thinks it's too obvious. He drops to the ground and grabs the hero's leg. Then the young man gets up, trying to throw his opponent onto his back. The guy screams excitedly that the inferior piece of shit should die right there. We see Leon's face. It turns out that he is lying on the ground in front of his opponent. The guy is trying to understand what just happened to him. Panmark looks at the hero in amazement. In turn, he thinks that this is not enough yet. Beads of sweat are running down the instructor's face. He cannot believe what he is seeing. This could not be the fighting sense of a 12-year-old teenager. Panmark remembers the events of a minute ago, when Leon dodged a counterattack and tried to knock the enemy down. He then thought that Leon would win. However, Zeke hit his opponent in the chin with his fist and freed himself from his grip. The instructor remembers the moment of the blow. Panmark thinks that it was Leon who lost his vigilance, believing that he had victory in the bag. But Zeke was very calm. Even though his counterattack failed, the concentration and precision needed to inflict such precise and effective damage. The hero, his fists still clenched, breathes heavily. The instructor looks at him, trying to figure out if this is the Zeke Draker he knows. Leon comes to his senses. He thinks he can't do anything like that. The boy realizes he must first get to a comfortable distance. He tries to get closer to his opponent, but receives a powerful blow to the thigh. The young man's face is distorted in pain. He curses, not understanding where this little piece of shit got such strength from. Leon tries to lean on his leg, which refuses to stand. He calls his cousin a small wretch. The hero thinks he can control his strength this time. His opponent punches him and indignantly asks how the insignificant bastard dares to do such a thing. The activation of the heightened senses skill is reported. The subsequent description clarifies that the heightened senses are temporary. A smile appears on the hero's face. He realizes that he is experiencing a familiar feeling. Purple streams of energy wrap around the hand with a clenched fist. Zeke grabs the opponent by the hand and begins to throw him over himself. He thinks that now, accustomed to controlling the ether, it will be easy for him to put an end to this fight. Leon is slammed into the ground. The spectators look in amazement at the clouds of smoke rising above the arena. The activation of the precision strike skill is announced. The hero hits the opponent in the chest with his elbow. We see the description of the precision strike skill. It is reported that the hit occurs on the weak points of the enemy in order to inflict critical damage. The bones of the rib cage are visible under the hero's hand. Smiling, Zeke raises his fist to deliver the finishing blow. Leon begs him to stop. However, the hero's hand still flies into his jaw. Zeke declares that Leon should learn a lesson from all this. Panmark looks at what is happening in amazement. The students watching the fight are also amazed. The heroes ask if he said it right. Leaning over his fallen opponent, the boy advises him to remember this for the rest of his days. Zeke places his hand on the top of his head and declares that his head has become a little clearer now. The students look at the hero angrily. He asks them why they are staring at him and demands that they stop whispering. He beckons them towards him with his finger. The boy tells them to come down to him one by one if they have something to say. Among the other students, we see a boy standing in a strange pose. He says the hero's first and last name. Zeke looks at him calmly, his hands in his pockets. He declares that he is challenging the boy to a pankration. Now we see the face of this young man. He declares that he has a lot to say to the hero. Zeke recognizes another cousin of his name is Jaken Bardek. The hero, who is standing in the round arena, declares that this is wonderful, but with only one cousin, he will be too bored. He suggests that Liam Stone should also take part in the duel with Jaken. We see both boys, who were challenged by the hero, raising his right hand. Zeke states that, in his opinion, this is the only way his opponent will have any chance. Jaken, gritting his teeth in anger, asks if Zeke really just tried to humiliate him. The hero, smiling brightly, states that this is exactly what he wanted to do to this idiot. Jaken is ready to burst with anger. He thinks that he will beat his cousin to death. The opponents are standing in the arena next to Panmark. He asks the hero not to do anything ahead of time. The boy readily agrees. The instructor asks the students to get ready. Zeke looks at one of the opponents. He is interested to see Liam Stone, the king of mercenaries, here again. The young man he is thinking about calmly looks at the hero. The two boys are standing next to each other. In a past life, Liam, as a servant of Jakin, studied at the cradle and the academy, but because he was a distant relative, he was left without an education. Liam, shedding streams of tears, begging someone, clutching the hem of his shirt. He begged to enter the highest learning academy, Valhalla, but in the end, he was forced to join the knightly order of a small state called Baronin. We see a knight with a huge sword. Once Baronin fell, Liam became a mercenary, but in troubled times, people are drawn to the strong. After a long time as a mercenary, he became a red knight and founded his own guild, Stone Mercenaries. We see what this character turned into in the hero's past life. Liam Stone united the largest mercenary groups under his command, which is why he was called the King of Mercenaries. When the Empire hired his subordinates, Liam Stone began to actively participate in continental wars. Two warriors clash with each other in a battle in the middle of a snowy desert. The hero and the Northerners confront Liam on the battlefield. Zeke looks at his opponent, smiling. He thinks that things could turn out differently now. Tanmark gives the command to begin the fight. Jakin, smiling strangely, strikes. However, confusion appears in his eyes. The hero stops his fist. Zeke reminds him that he asked for his opponents to attack simultaneously. Zeke throws his cousin's hand away. He asks in bewilderment if the opponent really thinks that he will play along with his cheap tricks. The next moment, Jakin strikes with his foot. Judging by the expression on his face, he himself receives some unpleasant effect. Jakin stands with his knees slightly bent. Zeke, smiling, rubs the back of his head. He states that the guy should have looked around well before striking. Judging by everything, Jakin receives a powerful blow to the ass. Zeke flies into the attack, reproaching the opponent for being distracted. The hero's fist glows with purple energy. Jakin defends himself with his arms crossed in front of him. We see fear in the boy's eyes. Zeke asks if he's too scared. The hero knees his opponent in the leg. He states that Jakin couldn't even predict his actions. That's why, according to him, they had to attack together. The hero punches his opponent in the ribs. Blood spurts out of his mouth. Zeke, smiling, looks the boy straight in the eyes and states that he doesn't stand a chance alone since he's nobody. Jakin, bending at the waist, loudly calls his servant and orders him to kill this idiot. Liam stands next to his master, who is writhing in pain on the ground. We see the servant's hand. The young man wraps his knuckles with bandages. Zeke thinks that this guy is also 12 years old, like the rest of the participants in this fight. The most annoying thing about fighting him is the insane swing of his arms. Liam puts his long arm aside. The hero realizes that he can't do anything against him if he attacks first. Zeke protects his face with his fists. He thinks that he needs to take the initiative. The hero, with his ghostly copy visible behind him, strikes. Liam defends himself with his elbow. We see traces on the arena. The activation of the slash skill is announced. Many ghostly purple figures appear on the battlefield. We see a description of the skill being used. It is an E-rank skill that unleashes a flurry of attacks on the enemy, preventing them from seeing. The spectators look at what is happening in amazement. They think this is some kind of madness. We see part of the stands, as well as half of the instructor's face. Zeke mentally addresses them and states that he understands the reasons for their surprise, because they have never seen anything like this before. This is a technique of northern fist fighting from the Middle Lands, where swords reign. Zeke looks at Liam with alarm. The young man asks himself who this is. It seems to him that he simply cannot defeat this opponent. We see many flashes on the hero's body. He understands that he has not really done anything yet, and he is already out of breath. But the reason is not only in him, but also in the monstrous physical preparation of the enemy. Liam stands, covering his head with his fists. The hero realizes that he does not carry out any counterattacks or dodges. He just endures, not losing his vigilance. When he was a king, he was more aggressive. The guy's body is at the limit. We see a clenched fist. Streams of purple energy rise around it. Zeke mentally tells the enemy that it is now clear to him how strong the enemy's body is. He must unbalance the enemy. In front of us is a yellow eye. Zeke delivers another blow and hits the enemy's elbow. Energy flies over Liam's shoulder. Zeke is amazed to see that he dodged it, which is truly amazing since Liam can't even see the ether with his eyes. The hero grinds his teeth in anger. His opponent's face looks much calmer. Zeke realizes that everyone here has some kind of crazy sense. A hand intercepts an arm. Liam throws the hero over himself and screams loudly. There is great tension in his eyes. Somehow, Zeke manages to land a blow to the back of the enemy's head. The hero's hand lands on the opponent's arm. The use of the class skill heightened senses is reported. What we have here is something like a storyboard of the move the hero performed, as a result of which he managed to break the opponent's arm. Zeke grabs his opponent's head tightly with his legs. He thinks that no matter how strong his body is, without oxygen, no one can last long. Zeke gets hit in the face. We see Liam twisting and delivering a powerful blow, causing blood to spurt from the boy's mouth. Zeke thinks he's dealing with a crazy bastard. We see his teeth clenched with unimaginable tension. His opponent's eyes are emitting an eerie glow. Someone is shouting loudly that a winner will be determined, and I really wonder who it will be. We see clenched teeth. Now we see a fist in front of us. It falls to the top of his head. We see glowing eyes. The students are watching this battle with some disgust. We see the face of another young man. The back of his hand falls to the arena. It looks like Liam has passed out. He falls heavily. We see a guy smiling. He thinks he expected nothing less from one of the participants in the fight. This is worth destroying. We see Jaken in front of us, and he is going to destroy a hero. We see a monumental brick building in front of us. A servant tells his master that he is rumored to have been injured during Pankration. When asked if everything is okay, the master replies that everything is fine. Decker stands behind the hero. He apologizes for his impudence and asks permission to check the young man's pulse. Zeke understands that the servant wants to know if the hero has awakened his aura. While buttoning his shirt, he tells the servant to wait a second. Zeke extends his hand to the man. The man thanks the young master. In front of us is a young man's hand. He looks at Decker in amazement. Zeke guesses that this is the Blue Knight. The man feels the young man's pulse. We see the skeleton of the young man. When checking if someone has awakened, they usually look at the dantian, but Decker approaches this matter more thoroughly. The hero frowns at his servant. Granting an aura to someone else is difficult enough in itself, but if a person is able to control their aura so precisely, then they are most likely the Blue Knight. We see precious stones. Not all knights are the same. They differ in their combat skills and ability to control aura. Before us is a warrior with clenched fists and a white diamond. The white swordsman is a beginner level. Most children before the blessing ceremony are like this. Now before us is a guy with a sword. Then we see a young man with white energy flowing around him. Yellow swordsman. This level is for those who have awakened their aura and opened their dantian. All students of the cradle become yellow swordsmen after the blessing ceremony. Once you can freely control the aura, you can receive the title of knight. The warrior raises his sword to strike. Purple knight. At this level, you can strengthen your sword with aura. Before us is another warrior, also with a sword above his head. Blue knight. At this level, you can manifest the blade of the aura. Before us is a fighter who glows with pink energy, and the realm of those who have gone beyond their limits. The realm that the mercenary King Liam Stone and the hero himself reached before his regression. We see a knight emitting purple energy. Now we see a red gem. It is reported that the last sentences were of the red knight category. There are also black knights, but there are only a few such monsters on the entire continent. Decker probes the young man's hand. He does not understand how it happened that such an experienced person became his nanny. We see the young man's eyes. He thinks that none of this matters. His servant is unable to detect the ether that only 2 people in the entire world can use. Decker, pursing his lips, looks down. He lets go of the hero's hand. The man asks if the young master is hiding something from him. In front of us is the right side of the servant's face. Zeke asks why he would do that and wonders if he himself is hiding something. Zeke and Decker look at each other. The guy waves his hand and walks away, declaring that he was just joking. Decker asks why his master has suddenly changed so much. The young man, whose legs we can see, says that the servant asked the question incorrectly. He should have asked why he changed only now. Zeke, his eyes sparkling, looks at his servant. He says that from now on, a lot will change. Decker looks at the young man. He says that everything is simply falling into place and the servant just needs to follow his master. Decker bows and says that he understands everything. The door opens slightly. Decker says that he has prepared the training hall as Zeke asked. The guy praises the servant for his diligence. Having bowed, Decker says goodbye to the guy. He waves his hand irritably and says that the man can rest. He thinks that if the servant was ordered to keep an eye on him, then he should keep him close to himself in order to extract information. The problem is that it is not yet clear who exactly ordered the servant to keep an eye on him. Zeke walks past powerful stone columns. He thinks that the surveillance was unlikely to be organized by someone on his mother's side. Perhaps it was the work of one of his brothers or sisters. We see exercise equipment lying on stands. The hero looks around the room he found himself in surprise. The guy says that if this is his personal training room, then this house really lives up to its name. We see that there is a cabinet for weapons. The hero decides that he should check the system first. An information card dedicated to him appears. Zeke carefully examines the blue window. In front of us is information about skills. The slash skill has improved. Zeke thoughtfully asks if the skill change depends on the frequency of its use. Looking at the blue window, he recalls events from the very recent past. Then the skill activated by itself during the battle. It turns out that he had all this before. Will a new skill be added if he learns something new? What is the difference between a skill and a class skill? which are activated identically. Zeke asks himself important questions while continuing to look at the system window. The hero turns his attention to the bottom of his information card. He does not understand what it means that the dragon skills cannot be displayed and why 10 points are needed to unlock them. Zeke presses his finger on one of the lines. A new message appears, which says that karma points can be earned by destroying monsters. The current number of points is 0. In front of us is the left side of the hero's face. He states that the dungeons are full of monsters, but to get there, you need to become a purple knight. We see a hand holding an artifact and a thoughtful young man. He is now much more interested in why he regressed into the past and what this system is. This skill and class indicate that the hero must be connected to that ancient relic, but he has little information. Zeke is holding a sword in his hands. He decides that he will train until he becomes stronger. The guy looks at his weapon. He brings the blade to his face. Zeke says that it doesn't matter how he trains. He is a Draker. We see a knight in armor and a mage. There are two powers known in the world: the knight's aura and the mage's mana. Knights strengthen their aura in dungeons. Mages control their mana with circles. These two powers are at opposite ends of the spectrum, so if one is awakened, it is impossible to awaken the other. We see the outline of a woman's head. Unfortunately, Zeke was unable to awaken either the Danshin or the circle. He was expelled by his own family, and while wandering, he met a master. We see a warrior standing in front of the boy. This man gave him many different knowledge, but the most useful things Zeke learned were healing and the etheric hall. Thanks to the etheric hall that the master developed, he was able to control the energy of nature, ether. We see a young man emitting streams of purple energy. He strikes with his sword. The master and Zeke are the only users of ether in the world. The boy leans heavily on his sword. He has only trained for 2 hours, but he seems to be about to faint. The activation of the class skills healing and energy recovery is reported. Blood flows through the hero's fingers. His hands are shaking. Healing is a very rare skill that he did not even know existed until he met the master. If he used it in front of people, they would treat him as if he was abnormal. Beads of sweat are running down the hero's cheeks. The boy remembers his recent fight when he defeated his opponent. That's why he couldn't use healing during the fight with Liam Stone. He had to quickly heal himself as soon as he got back to his room. Zeke puts his hand to his chest. The boy holds a sword in his hand. He feels better and decides to continue training. We see clouds in the red sky. Zeke looks up tiredly and says that it's time for him to have dinner. The boy stands in the middle of a huge hall. He doesn't know what to say to his servant. A week later, the Cradle cafeteria. We see several students. Some of them say that Zeke has become a completely different person. In front of us is a row of delicious-looking dishes. Someone asks if this is the guy everyone used to think was a loser. There are stacks of plates on the table. Someone suggests that the hero could have resorted to black magic. He is told that it is quite possible. They express hope that the guy will be able to pacify stronger guys. We see the top of the magnificent doors. Now there is a chandelier in front of us. There are exquisite dishes on the table. Someone is cutting a steak. A fork picks up a piece of meat. We see a young man who has put this slice in his mouth. It is reported that Rena is in front of us. 4 people are sitting at the table surrounded by servants. One of them says that perhaps someone sitting there has no appetite, but it is better to eat anyway. The energy will be needed for a sword fight. The young man is cutting meat. It is reported that his name is Owen Simmons. The guy sitting opposite him slams his fist on the table. He asks if Owen is trying to provoke him to do something terrible. He declares that he just wanted to be nice, but apparently his interlocutor's inferiority complex makes itself felt. The offended guy jumps up from the table. A piece of meat falls to the floor. Rena looks angrily at the brawlers. We see the green eyes of one of the guys. A young man raises his hand and asks someone what he is going to do. There are 4 people at the table, all thinking about the hero. We see someone's hand. Its owner says that the Pankration was tough, but quite impressive. However, when it comes to swords, the spectacle will be very pathetic. We see the face of the guy. He suggests thinking about what the hero will do if he can't even hold a sword properly. The people at the table are lost in thought. The speaker says that Zeke is so weak that he had to buy a special sword because the usual ones are too heavy for him. Losing to this worthless person makes no sense. The guy says that his interlocutors know this very well too. The hand is holding a fork. Jakin, who seems to be saying the last phrases, says that the hero was just lucky to win against him in Pankration. Rena, looking at the guy with displeasure, questions his statement. We see the faces of the young people sitting at the table. Rena heads for the exit, declaring that if they really think that way, they have no right to be knights of the Draker house. We see a bloody sword, a sword duel. Unlike Pankration, real swords are used here, and this is the cause of most of the incidents in the Cradle. In addition, this is where the difference in the students' skills is most clearly evident. A month after the current final exams, the blessing ceremony will begin, during which the Drakers awaken their aura. In front of us is a vague figure with a sword. Pan Mark orders the hero to get up. He stands smiling with the sword over his shoulder. The boy walks forward as if nothing had happened. The spectators sitting behind him mock the boy. Someone asks what kind of ridiculously large sword it is. Someone assumes that the boy seriously thinks that a large sword will give him strength. The hero is called by his first and last name. The boy opens his left eye. Rena approaches him with a determined step. The opponents approach the instructor, standing in the middle of the arena. The girl, her eyes flashing angrily, declares that she chooses the hero as her opponent. The guy's hand is on the hilt of the sword. He declares that everything suits him. Smiling, Zeke puts his weapon forward. The girl begins to take her blade out of the sheath. She does not understand how the young man raises the claymore with such ease. Rena holds the weapon with the blade down. She understands that in front of her is not the Zeke she knew before. That guy did not even know how to hold a weapon correctly. Zeke, smiling, easily holds a huge sword in front of him. The girl suspects that he has changed so much because he has grown up. She also thinks that the guy's aura is affecting her. Rena grinds her teeth in anger at herself. She calls on herself to stop being afraid. She cannot allow the enemy to intimidate her before the fight. The girl convinces herself that she will succeed. Rena puts her sword towards the enemy. We see the hero's right eye. A bead of sweat runs down his left cheek. The hero hopes that he can handle it, but the fight with the Lightning Knight promises to be quite a tense contest. We are shown the girl in the past and now. Rena is known as the Lightning Knight. She, like many other knights, made a name for herself during the Continental Wars. She was also noted as one of the greatest drakers of the next generation, as she awakened her aura even before she underwent the blessing ceremony. Zeke stares at his opponent. He thinks that she awakened her aura several years ago, but did not use it from the beginning because she did not want to overstep her principles. The instructor raises his hand and gives the command to begin the fight. The opponent's blades clash. Rena quickly steps back. Now she swings to strike. Her sword is pointed towards her opponent. We see someone's leg. Zeke stands with a huge sword in front of him. We see the young man's left eye. The girl has exceeded his expectations so far. Rena looks at her opponent, covering herself with her sword. The fight continues. The fans in the stands are shouting at the girl to stop playing with the hero and finish him off. In front of us are three of the hero's cousins. One of them calls the one who said the previous phrase an idiot. It doesn't look like Rena is playing with her opponent. And indeed, the girl misses and almost falls off her feet. The girl's weapon is next to her right ear. She thinks that Zeke is holding on well, but she still feels the tears. The opponents are facing each other. In front of us is the girl's eye, raising her sword to strike. Rena realizes that no matter how quickly she uses the moment, the guy's sword always blocks her attacks, as if anticipating her actions. We see how the hero's sword deflects the girl's blade. Zeke holds the sword point down. Immediately after that, another gap opens. We see the eye in close-up. The girl realizes that all this looks like a training fight designed to train her. Above the tiny figures of the fighters, the huge head of a bearded man is visible. The fighting ground is shown from above. The girl looks at her opponent with an exhausted expression. His face is completely indifferent. He understands that this is how the Lightning Knight fought when she was in the cradle. She fights fairly, and this is to be expected from someone who values her principles. But this is precisely what is holding her back. Rena stands with her sword outstretched. Zeke thinks that he can help the girl get out of the shell that has bound her. He crouches down and places his sword on the ground. Rena looks at this stunt in surprise. She sees that the opponent has an extremely low stance and understands that he intends to close the distance in one dash. The arena is shown from above again. Rena thinks that Zeke, however, may have misjudged her speed. The hero flies forward with his sword raised to strike. The girl realizes that he is very fast. A blow follows, which hits the ground. Rena stares at her opponent. She thinks that as long as there is distance between them, she can react to his movements. The tip of the sword scratches the arena surface. The hero's sword leaves a bright purple mark. Rena looks at her opponent with concern. Stones cut out of the arena fly at her face. She covers herself with her elbow. Blood is visible on the girl's nose. Zeke flies forward, holding his sword back. The tip of the weapon ends up next to the opponent's neck. Rena thinks it's time to finish. The sword the hero was armed with flies high into the air. It falls far behind the opponents. The stands shout that Zeke has lost, and Rena, as usual, did not use her aura. She was just great. Zeke looks down sadly. In front of us is Pan Mark. He realizes that the cadets in the stands did not notice something. In front of us is the girl's chin. As the guy's attack approached her, Rena still used her aura. It was barely noticeable. The hilt of the sword glows faintly blue. Pan Mark looks at the girl. He thinks that Rena promised not to use aura until she entered the academy, and the guy made her compromise her principles. Rena looks down in shame. She asks the enemy what he is doing. Zeke raises his left hand to strike and says that this is not the end. The guy grabs the girl by the throat. Blood flows into the arena. Rena is on one knee in front of the guy. Someone from the stand shouts that this is a sword fight, and the prank that the hero allowed himself was very cheap. The cadets shout at the boy that it is not proper for a knight to throw away his sword. The crowd cheers for the girl. They shout at the boy that he will never become a real knight and it would be better if he apologized for his shameful behavior. Zeke clears his ear with his little finger. The girl tries to get to her feet. The boy asks her if she wants to continue. Rena holds her hand to her throat. She thinks that she has not lost yet and the boy only hit her because she was not careful. We see a black spot. The girl doubts that she is thinking rationally. She remembers how the boy's hand got into her throat. Rena understands that if he had been holding a dagger, she would already be dead. The girl closes her eyes. Standing in front of her opponent in the arena, she says that she has lost. The students look at her in amazement. A hand is lying on the hilt of the sword. Zeke Draker was considered trash just a few days ago, and now he has defeated one of the most talented pupils of the local families, Rena Turan. The opponents move away from each other. The stands begin to welcome the hero. Under the walls of the burning castle, the warriors get rid of the corpses, throwing them off the cliff. Two officers are visible through the window. One of them calls the other Abel and asks how he can drink tea in such a situation. We see a letter in the envelope in which it was delivered. The officer declares that this bastard Zeke defeated Rena. His interlocutor places a cup on the table. He declares that William is always very serious. The red-haired officer leans over the table and asks how much time is left until the blessing ceremony. He hears that until the next full moon. Abel moves away from the table and declares that now is the best time to visit the family. William asks in bewilderment if Abel is going to go there alone. He places his hand on the hilt of his sword and declares that this only piqued his curiosity. Abel looks out the window. He says he wonders what kind of awakening their youngest will go through. The opponents who were fighting in the arena disperse. Zeke's victory shocked the entire cradle, but he simply returned to the training center and resumed training. About a month later, on the day of the blessing ceremony, in front of us is a part of the building. Inside, someone sighs heavily. The boy wipes his face with a towel. He really doesn't understand how he managed to become a red knight with such a body in his past life. Zeke gives the command to open the status window. It appears, and the boy begins to carefully examine it. He notices that as soon as the skill proficiency exceeds the expert level, it jumps up one step and the level is reset to 0. Here are the names of the skills and their proficiency levels. Zeke, his eyes shining, rushes into the attack. The boy even managed to increase his proficiency in swift steps, a skill he only received during the duel. Someone knocks on the door behind the young man. Zeke asks what Decker wants. He replies that they are leaving in 2 hours. We see the boy standing in the training hall. He states that he will join soon and a servant should prepare things. We see a majestic castle and a moving procession of carriages. Zeke, resting his head on his hand, looks out the window. He has not been to the main estate for a long time. It belongs to the Draker family and is located on the territory of the Duchy of Troy. In front of us is a map of the continent. The main residence of the family is located in the very heart of the continent, in the Fortress of the Four Seasons in the Middle Lands. The blessing ceremony must be held in the main estate, where the legend of Dragonslayers was born. The hero gets out of the carriage. He looks at a majestic building with many spires. It is reported that in front of him is the main estate of the Draker family, the Dragonslayer. A warrior ceremony is being held in a huge hall. Someone calls for everyone's attention. Zeke stands among other young men. He has never realized it before, but all the spectators are famous people, often written about in the Continental News Bulletin. We see a group of spectators watching the ceremony. The hero thinks that his family has sent someone to watch him too. We see the boy's eyes. He knows that whatever their intentions, once they see that he is unable to awaken, they will simply ignore the young man. Zeke looks at someone with disgust. The boy clenches his fists in anger and cannot understand what this bastard is doing here. We see a firm handshake. One of the people who extended their hand says that he has not seen the owner of the other hand for a long time. The owner replies that this is absolutely true. The first asks what brought him here for the blessing ceremony. Perhaps someone from this class attracted his attention. We see the lower part of the face and think we know who it is. The man with the red hair states that he has his own reasons for being here. The young man whose sword we see taps his fingers on the table. He states that his beloved younger brother is here. We now see a close-up of the man. It is stated that he is the second son of the Draker family, Lion Blade, Abel Draker. The boy looks at the hero. The latter gives him a hostile look. The hero thinks that Lion Blade, Aka the Butcher Knight Abel, is here. Zeke turns away from the unpleasant man. He tries to calm down, since there is nothing he can do right now anyway. Abel is standing on the balcony overlooking the main hall. In the hero's past life, he would never have come to the hero's blessing ceremony. Zeke suspects that everything has changed because of his actions in this reality. If so, then perhaps he is being given a chance. Zeke clenches his fist. Before us are neat rows of cadets. Someone declares that the blessing ceremony is beginning. Aaron is summoned. We see a huge bull standing in front of a statue of a knight with a sword. In front of us is a slightly frightened cadet. He lowers his hand into the water. A dark spot appears on his palm. Streams of white energy rise from the water. They roll onto the statue of the knight. It looks like Eren is sensing something very unpleasant. We see a long white stream. Now in front of us is a cadet with his hands raised to his chest, emitting powerful streams of white energy. With the blessing rite, each representative of the Draker line awakens their sealed aura when it is time for them to leave the cradle at the age of 12. The Master of Ceremonies calls the next cadet. Compared to normal knights, who awaken after 20 years, this is incredibly fast. A cadet walks past the mentor with his head down. Panmark calls the next one. We see a red and blue mist. There were a few rare instances where the Dragonslayer trait known as mana suppression would awaken along with the aura. We see lanterns on the walls. The people present notice that something is wrong with the mana lamps. Someone shouts that this can't be happening. We see the faces of the spectators. One of the girls says excitedly that she sees a red glow. They will become at least as strong as the yellow knights, although some of them even rivaled the red and black knights. The sword of the knight statue glows. We see a cadet clenching his fists. They will awaken the pure blood. Panmark raises his hand, asking for gloves. Because of mana suppression, everyone will have to use special gloves made by the family, otherwise the cadet will not be able to live a normal life. It seems to be Rena, looking at her hands in surprise. We see a crest that resembles a bat. When someone proves that they are a pure blood, they are given the name Draker. Along with this, the proven one will be provided with unimaginable family support. The next challenger is called to the bowl. The audience excitedly chatters among themselves. Someone says that they will finally see the main course of the evening. I wonder what kind of awakening this challenger will go through. It is assumed that it will be a pureblood awakening. After all, he defeated Rena. We see a boot. The hero stands in front of a huge bowl. He never thought that he would stand in front of this damned statue again. The last time was terrible. The guy remembers the look on his face. He entered the cradle only to undergo the blessing ceremony, but in the end, he was disgraced. The hero, who is watched by dozens of eyes, dips his hand into the bowl. This time, everything is different. He can not only heal, but also control the ether. Zeke remembers the events he had to go through already in this life. He did not give up and did not give up. He stood up for himself with his own will. The boy puts his hand in the water and begs the cursed bronze statue to take care of him. We see the statue of the knight to whom the hero's plea is addressed. The young man's face is smiling. The statue begins to vibrate. The crowd is disappointed. Someone asks if it's really over. Abel looks down in disappointment. Someone says that this has never happened before. The hero's facial features are blurred. He takes his hand out of the water. Zeke reproaches himself for his false expectations. What made him think that something would change? The young man, gritting his teeth in anger, looks at Abel standing on the balcony. He thinks that this bastard has made him overconfident. The spectators watching this are whispering in disappointment. They can't believe that the hero couldn't awaken. It seems that even the blood of the head of the family wasn't enough to obtain the cursed blood. People are confused as to how the boy could defeat Rena. It is suggested that he must have pulled some dirty trick. Someone else says that the boy has disgraced the family. Zeke holds out his hand, which someone wipes with a towel. The hero thinks that people like him never change. However, he does not lose hope and thinks that there are many ways to become stronger without having to awaken. The hero's eyes widen in surprise. He sees messages. The system apologizes to Zeke Draker. Due to an error during processing, the message was sent with a delay. The youth looks at the blue window in surprise. A series of notifications appear in front of him. The hero learns that the terminal was missing the necessary information during class identification. Now it has been entered using system authority. The boy tries to comprehend what this all means. He sees another group of messages. Class information input complete. User talent identified as healer. Confirmed, your class has been unlocked. The acquired class has been identified as rare. Zeke turns his head. He thinks that this simply cannot be. The statue behind him glows with a pure red light. The spectators notice this too. Someone says that they have seen the awakening of a pureblood. The conviction sounds that this boy will begin his path as a red. We see the hero's right eye. In front of him are two more messages. The terminal has established a connection. The blessing of the ancient dragon sealed in the user's soul has been activated. Streams of yellow energy swirl around the young man. Abel looks at the young man in amazement. Notifications continue to come in. Teen's talent fighter's blood has awakened. The awakened talents have united. A new class has been created by combining rare talents. Zeke looks through the system windows in disbelief. He sees another one. The unique class immortal has awakened. Spectators are watching the ceremony from the balcony. Someone asks what the golden glow is. Is this how purebloods awaken? Although, if you think about it, there was a bit of red around the night. Zeke, with the system windows hanging in front of him, looks to his left. He understands that the audience's doubts are natural, but if he says anything here, everything will turn against him. We see people arguing heatedly. Someone says that the mana lamp is fine after all. Another spectator suggests that the sword statue is broken. There was no mana suppression, this can't be a pureblood awakening. Someone claps their hands. In front of us is Eavesdropping. He asks the people around him why they are all so serious since 2 purebloods have awakened at once. Standing in front of the railing, he suggests that everyone celebrate this event. We see the vague outlines of 2 people with glowing eyes. However, most of the spectators express joy. One of them declares that Abel is absolutely right. They have 2 purebloods awakened at once, and this is a real blessing. Abel, whom we see in the distance on the balcony, asks why everyone is frozen. Gloves must be brought. Panmark bows and declares that this will be done immediately. Zeke examines the gloves and realizes that they are quite heavy. The youth steps aside, and the mentor calls the next contender. He eagerly runs up. In front of us is Abel. Zeke stands with his back to him. The boy thinks that this man's intentions are obvious, but he will have to accept his help. Zeke grits his teeth in disgust. It seems to him that all this smells like shit. Panmark spreads his arms wide and, smiling, declares to the spectators that this is the end of the blessing ceremony. A celebration is about to take place. The mentor invites everyone to enjoy the festivities. Zeke heads for the exit. He doesn't give a damn about this party and will try to find the training hall, which should be somewhere in this palace. Someone calls the young man by name. We see the boy's surprised eyes. Zeke looks over his shoulder. He didn't expect Abel to talk to him so soon. He is standing behind the hero. Abel asks where the boy is going so early. Is he really going to ignore the party? Abel looks at the boy and congratulates him, a purebred, on waking up. The young man extends his hand. Zeke smiles. If he doesn't shake the outstretched hand, Abel will perceive this as hostility. The hero decides to play along. We see gloved hands reaching out to each other. The hero remembers a terrible picture from the past. The fingers of the hands almost touch. Abel looks at the boy in bewilderment. He lowers both his hand and his eyes. Only one hand remains hanging in the air. A very strange smile appears on Abel's face. He states that it turned out somehow awkward. Zeke looks at his interlocutor with disgust. Even for the sake of saving face, he could not shake this scumbag's hand. Abel, waving his hand, turns away. He says that he can't do anything and will have to be content with just a meeting. The guy puts his hand on the hero's shoulder and declares that they will see each other again. Abel leaves. Zeke thinks that they really will definitely meet again. The young man is incredibly angry. We see a fountain located in front of the building. The audience watching the ceremony discusses its results. Someone clarifies whether 2 purebreds were really identified at once. He is told that it is so, but the golden glow that Zeke emitted was quite shocking. The blonde asks if this is not the first time something like this has happened. Someone says that at first everyone thought that he had not awakened at all. The question is asked where Zeke is now. In front of us is a balcony. We see a discarded frock coat and gloves. The hero unbuttons his collar and sighs in relief. He thought he would suffocate there. The guy is in a room with luxurious furnishings. We see a bright chandelier above the guy's head. He does not understand what is happening to him. All pure-blooded awakened have the ability to suppress mana. This ability proves that a person resists dragons, the source of mana. Zeke remembers the lamps hanging on the wall, and then Rena, looking at her hands in amazement. Since most mechanisms use mana as a source of energy, pure-bloods have to walk around in gloves. The hero looks at his clothes. If he were a pureblood, then problems would have arisen the moment he took off his gloves. Zeke calls up the status window. A blue window appears with a lot of information. The boy analyzes it thoughtfully. What he sees is completely different from what it was before. Mana suppression has been replaced by mana reflection. The boy places his hand on the back of the chair. He thinks he should read up on this. A message appears stating that mana reflection creates a distortion field that zeroes out nearby mana. Zeke covers his mouth with his hand. It turns out that mana reflection is classified as a skill. The mana lamps were fine because it is not a passive skill. The hero sees 2 more information windows. Before the ritual, he was a rare rank healer, and now he has become a unique immortal. The boy places his hand on his face. He remembers how one of the cadets stuck his hand in the bowl and what the statue's sword looked like. In the vast majority of cases, graduates had awakenings with a blue aura, and only Rena had a red glow during her awakening. Zeke remembers the red stripes on the statue's sword. The hero looks down thoughtfully. Initially, its glow was also red, but then changed to gold. The system reported that the classification terminal lost important information. We see a corresponding plate above the head of the knight statue. The guy tries to understand whether the classification terminal was meant to be a bronze statue. As soon as the system entered the information, the bronze statue began to emit a red glow. We see a knight with a sword in his hands in an information window. Zeke rubs the back of his head with his hand. It seems that he understands what happened. In front of us is a statue shrouded in multicolored streams of fire and energy. The bronze statue does not determine whether the cadet has awakened or not. It determines the user's predisposition, his class. Red is a rare class, gold is unique. The bronze statue is an ancient relic used even before Terrakin, the founder of the Draker family. Now the class category does not exist, so it was only used to check whether a person has awakened or not. The guy remembers how he himself stuck his hand in the bowl. He realizes that everyone has been misinterpreting the red glow that signifies a rare class in the awakening of purebloods. Zeke points at the blue window hanging in front of him. He realizes that no family head has ever understood this. The hero now has karma points. This is also evident from the message that appears where their number is indicated as 100. Zeke looks to your left. He tries to figure out when he received them. Was it at that very moment? The hero sees a system window in front of him offering to use points to see the dragon's skills and clicks on the yes option. A huge number of new system notifications appear in front of him. Comfortably lounging in a chair, Zeke looks up. He sees that he receives Dragon Vision and Dragon Might. The guy pays attention to the system window, which is dedicated to the first level Dragon Skill Devourer, which allows the user to eat and digest a lot of food. This skill costs 50 points. Zeke cannot understand why a skill that allows you to eat and digest a lot costs so much. He thinks that it is better to spend points on something that will definitely come in handy than to risk it. The guy reaches out to the system window. A notification appears that the skills Dragon Vision and Dragon Might have been unlocked. The hero looks at the window hanging in front of him. It seems to him that Dragon Might is too dangerous and it is unwise to use it here. A notification appears about activating the Dragon Vision skill. We see a yellow eye surrounded by magical formations. The boy lowers his feet to the floor. He looks to the side. Zeke expected more because detailed information was indicated there, but in fact, nothing has changed. The young man opens the window. His left eye emits a yellow glow. Zeke says that this is some kind of madness. We see his figure in the second floor window. The guy says that the statue standing in the center of the garden looks like it is right in front of him. This could be really useful. Zeke looks at the system window in surprise. It offers to get acquainted with detailed information about the detected object. The young man looks thoughtfully to his left. He tries to understand what was offered to him at all. Standing in the middle of the room, he sees informational descriptions of all the objects near him. In front of us is the left eye of the young man. The hero is standing in a completely unnatural pose. He understands that something is wrong with his body. Zeke falls exhausted into a chair. He wonders if all dragon skills are like this. If so, he won't be able to use them often. Two notifications appear about activating healing factor and energy recovery respectively. Zeke looks at something in surprise. Leaning towards the system window, he extends his left hand towards it. The young man states that he did not intend to use healing. We see apples lying in front of him. The hero realizes that all his class skills have become passive, and their levels have increased by 1. Zeke works with several blue windows at once. A description of the class skill healing factor appears, which helps the body automatically recover and is a passive ability. Smiling, the guy analyzes the information he sees. He understands that this skill gives him a huge advantage. We see the hero in his past life when he had to bite his own hand. It may seem that healing has already been overcome, but it is not something that can be constantly neglected. Its healing effect is limited. Swords are sticking out of the hero's back. Zeke bends over and examines the system window. He realizes that the healing factor is essentially infinite. Deciding to test this, the hero picks up a knife. In an act of self-mutilation, the boy cuts his left hand. Blood drips onto the floor. It is reported that the class skill healing factor has been activated. The boy looks on in amazement as the wounds disappear from his hands. He says that this simply cannot be. The young man sits at the table. He does not understand why it takes 5 years to graduate from the academy. Smiling, he thinks that he will finish it in 2 years. In front of us is a grandiose educational complex. Draker Academy, the best educational institution for knights on the continent. People are willing to pay any price to enter here. The Duchy of Troy, where the academy is located, is bustling with life in the spring when a new semester begins. We see several students. The hero casually walks forward. He thinks that the students with higher ratings are no different from the adults. They are all perfectly trained. We see several more cadets. However, if the hero compares the students with higher ratings with those who study in the cradle, they will still come from noble families. Zeke glances at the young man, whom we seem to have seen a little earlier. The guy thinks that this youth has already gained authority. This damned family, in his opinion, is rotten to the core. In front of us are several coats of arms. Among the many different families supporting the transcendental Draker family, the greatest influence is concentrated in the hands of only 3, called Great. In front of us is Rena. Tyrun is a model of strength. Now in front of us is Owen surrounded by his comrades. Simmons is a model of wisdom. We also see Jakin. Vardek supports with wealth. Even the children of these three families take advantage of their position. The hero looks to the left. He calmly leaves, realizing that he has nothing to do here. In front of us is a majestic multi-story building. It is reported that this is a high-ranking dormitory, the Platinum Mansion. The hero approaches it and thinks that it is certainly nice to be a pureblood. The Platinum Mansion is equipped with a study hall, a library, and other amenities. All of this is only available to students with the highest ranking. Even from the cradle, it is very difficult to get here. We see the grand interior of the academy. Two students are standing in front of the dormitory. As for the pureblood awakened, they are granted a special privilege, the Lord of the Floor. One floor is generally known here as Platinum. Zeke enters the dormitory. He is greeted by a maid who says that the guy was expected here. We see a gold-decorated door. Behind it, the young man is met by 2 rows of servants. The youth is told that he will be escorted to the desired floor. Many people greet him in one voice. Zeke, smiling wryly, looks at this performance. It seems to him that even for purebloods, this is too much. The bearded man bows and says that Sir Decker is waiting for the young man in his room. Zeke enters the huge apartment, where he is immediately greeted by a servant. The guy asks what is the matter. Decker says that he has something to give him. Zeke looks in surprise at the red chest standing on the table. The hero, smiling, looks at his hands. The guy says that the new gloves are much better than the temporary ones. The servant is very happy that the owner liked this new thing. Zeke says that since he has new gloves, it is worth updating the sword as well. We see the tip of the weapon. The young man asks the servant what he thinks about this. He replies that this is an excellent solution. The guy checks the blade with his finger. In front of us are mountains, coal, and a blacksmith. Due to the close proximity of the Duchy of Troy to the Mountains of Giants, there are a lot of high-quality materials and skilled craftsmen here. It even got to the point that, according to rumors, the first weapon of Academy graduates is Trojan. Decker says that he will look for a worthy master for the master. The young man takes the sword by the hilt. He says that there is no need to do this since he already has someone in mind. Zeke writes something. He hands the servant a small paper. The young man says that he wants to meet him, and Decker just needs to arrange a meeting. The servant reads what is written on the paper. He says that he has never heard of a master named Galleon Halbert before, but will contact him right away. Decker says that the young man's classes begin tomorrow, so it would be a good idea for him to familiarize himself with the relevant documents in advance. We see the papers lying on the table. Zeke promises to do this, although he does not want to think about studying. The sun is shining through the window. The hero is sitting in a chair in front of a round table. We see his eyes. The platinum floor is completely isolated, and the guy expects that he will have much more freedom to develop his dragon skills. Someone knocks on the door. The young man invites the one doing this to come in. A maid is standing at the door. She apologizes and says that the floor mistress Rena has sent an invitation to dinner. The hero's face looks thoughtful. He asks to be taken to the girl. We see the roof of the dormitory. The hero, with his hands in his pockets, goes there. The guy, smiling, looks at what seems to him very nice. He sees several strong guys standing behind Rena. It seems to the young man that these young people look like some kind of southern cartel. The girl greets the young man. The guys who are standing behind her turn around in unison and leave. The girl apologizes for this primitive show, stating that the people in her family are rather peculiar. Zeke sits down in the chair opposite and thanks the girl for her concern. We see the table at which the interlocutors are sitting from a very great height. The girl suggests discussing everything after the meal. Zeke looks at her. He thinks that the Lightning Knight uses her lower abdomen to control her aura. Is she preparing to become a purple knight? The girl, meanwhile, is choosing food from the menu. The young man is sitting opposite the girl, who is chatting with the waiter. He tries to figure out why Rene's swordsmanship has stalled. We are shown the table from above again. The guy thinks that the girl is wasting her potential. Zeke, holding a fork, looks at the girl. She is wiping her mouth. Next to her there is a whole mountain of empty plates. The guy thinks that he himself eats a lot, of course, but the amount Rena ate is outrageous. The girl, meanwhile, suggests getting down to business since lunch is over. She suggests that a cadet named Zeke Draker accept the support of the Turan family. The guy looks at her with some confusion. Putting his hands on the table, he suggests that Rena probably forgot that they are both pure-blooded awakened. The girl says that the guy has the wrong idea about pure-blooded awakened. Indeed, they have many privileges. This platinum floor alone is the best proof of that. In front of us is the upper part of the dormitory. The interlocutors are sitting at a long table. The girl says that, nevertheless, they do not receive any benefits in terms of their development. We see a coat of arms with an image of a bull above her head. Rena states that the Academy has accumulated centuries of theoretical and practical knowledge. There is a personal instructor for effective improvement of abilities. Without using all this, he will lag behind, no matter how wealthy he is. That is why he needs support. In front of us is Eavesdropping. Rena says that even he, a purebred, the youngest to ever receive the title of White Knight, the current Black Knight, received support from the Simmons family. We see the back of the hero's head. The girl states that the head of the Turan family did not explain the reason to her, but said that the hero does not receive support from his maternal family. Looking at the young man with displeasure, Rena says that she is repeating this for the last time. He must accept the support of the Turan family. The guy, smiling, waves his hand and declares that he will not do this. The girl looks at him perplexedly. She asks why the boy is making such a decision, since the support of the Turan family would be very beneficial for him. The hero places his hands on the armrests, preparing to stand up. He says that it is not about that. The boy stands with his back to the girl sitting at the table. He states that he does not need anything more than what he already has as a pure-blooded awakened. The young man moves away from the table and states that in gratitude for the dinner, he will give the girl one piece of advice. Zeke looks at her over his shoulder. He states that her sword has too much power. Rena looks at her interlocutor in amazement. We see a raised hand, on which is a glove with an image of a bat. The boy says that Rena thinks too well of those around her. Zeke stands next to a tree and performs various manipulations with its leaves. He asks Rena to listen to him carefully. Her greatest strength is the agility that comes from her flexible body. She should not attack head-on and crush her opponents with force. Moreover, she needs to smoothly parry the enemy's attacks to the side. A whirlpool of green leaves swirls around the hero's figure. Zeke puts his hand aside. He tells the girl to deliver single, delicate blows. If she can learn this, she will become several times stronger than she is now. The girl is amazed. Zeke walks between the columns and thanks her again for the meal. Rena slams her fist on the table. Looking angrily after the guy, she thinks that the Turan family is the embodiment of strength. She simply follows the traditions of her family, and it is not at all that she pays attention to someone. Rena stands in one shirt with a sword in her hand. She realizes that the guy is right after all. We see her among completely identical warriors. The girl thinks that since she was obsessed with the idea of becoming a person worthy of bearing the Turan name, this is what unintentionally reflected on her sword, and Zeke was able to see it. Next to the plate lies a green leaf. The girl takes it in her hand. When she was very little, everyone said that she was a genius, but no one gave her any good advice. We see a sheet of paper between the girl's fingers. She calls the hero by his first and last name and asks who he is. Rena looks in amazement at the sheet of paper cut exactly in the middle. The hero walks along the path and warms up his right hand. All his skills in the modified class have shown incredible effectiveness. The guy is trying to understand how okay he is after training all night long. Before us is a description of the class skill Infinite Stamina. Any fatigue is compensated by an infinite supply of stamina, a passive skill. We see several students. In a past life, this place seemed like hell on earth to the hero, but now that he has awakened as a pureblood, it is a real paradise. We see a completely happy face of the young man. He thinks that money and power are not everything, but there is nothing better than this. Cadets are running behind the young man. Two students at the establishment are looking at the hero from behind. One of them calls out to the hero. He turns around, puzzled. Owen Simmons approaches the young man, with a whole squad visible behind him. The young man says that the hero must also be studying in a special class. Zeke recognizes this guy. Owen is the third son in the Simmons family, one of the three considered great. We see two students bullying the third. Since cheating is the hallmark of his family, in the hero's past life he used others to intimidate him and cunningly maintain his own image. Owen asks the hero why he did not give any answer, although he received an invitation to dinner last night. Perhaps the letter did not reach him. Zeke does not understand why this guy is so kind to him now. Rubbing his chin, he remembers what was on his table yesterday. Owen, whose profile we see, asks why the hero did not respond to the invitation. He, smiling, says that Owen looks funny. Why should he, Zeke, answer everyone he meets? Owen looks at his interlocutor in amazement. We see someone's leg. In front of us is a smiling guy who says that the hero is behaving very rudely, despite the kindness of the young master. The bully warms up his fists. He calls the young man by his first and last name. The hero asks who is in front of him. He covers his eyes with his hand and asks if the young man really does not know him. The bully says that those who came from the cradle seem to be nothing special. Zeke sighs heavily. He turns around and, waving his hand, says that he understands perfectly well the bully's desire to show off in front of his master. However, he should not forget who he is talking to. It seems that the hero receives a rather sensitive blow. He flies away from the bully who hit him. Zeke puts his right hand in front of his face. He understands that high-ranking students can already control the aura. The bully spreads his arms wide and declares that his name is Durbin Roswell, also known as Durbin the Mighty, and that he will teach the hero a lesson in the young master's stead. A smile appears on the hero's face. He mocks the bully's nickname and says that it seems very funny for a cadet who is not even a knight to have one. We see a white trail. Zeke lunges forward and ends up with his head level with his opponent's stomach. The hero calls the bully a joker. The young man strikes. Durbin coughs up blood. The cadet flies far back. He lies on the ground with his head thrown back. The hero asks who will be next. With an ominous gleam in his eyes, Zeke asks the young master named Owen Zimmons to hurry up with his choice. He looks at the hero quite calmly. The two young men stand opposite each other. Owen passes the young man and manages to say that he clearly enjoys basking in the rays of his own glory. Watching the cadet squad go by, the hero declares that the guy is talking nonsense. In front of us is a magnificent building. There are two types of classes at Draker Academy. The regular ones are for those who have no talent, and those who study there have to put in a lot of effort to achieve anything. They have a strict regimen from early morning until late at night. We see the same building, but from a different angle. There is also a special class where cadets can freely choose subjects other than the basic ones. The place where the elite gathers is the special class. The hero looks thoughtfully to the right. Resting his chin on his hand, he thinks that this is why he had some expectations. We see students sitting in the auditorium. Zeke realizes that most of the people here are just graduates of the cradle. In what way can this class be considered special? It is very ordinary. Someone calls for silence. The young people sitting in the auditorium hear that someone completely exceptional has come to cheer up the first-year students of the special class today. The cadets happily greet the man just mentioned. They are informed that this man not only served as the commander-in-chief during the war with the Eastern Empire 20 years ago, but also became a hero who stopped the Empire's invasion thanks to his resourcefulness. A pot-bellied old man enters the classroom. The students are called to greet the dean of the academy, Howard Draker. The old man raises his right hand and, smiling, declares that he is glad to meet everyone. We see a man raising a flag above his head. Howard Draker is revered as a war hero and a tactical genius, but the truth is that the information he gave to the enemy to save his own skin simply shocked the enemy. We see sheets of paper falling down. Zeke knows that this man is a traitor who just got lucky. He is a real rat, not a hero. The boy frowns at the old man, resting his head on his hand. We see the back of the dean's head. Besides, in the hero's past life, he was the reason he was kicked out of the academy. We see shackles around the boy's neck. He lost the only place he could call home, so he was forced to wander all over the Duchy of Troy. Eventually, he was caught and sold to the Southern Cartel. We see a caravan on foot walking through the desert. The young man is going to make sure to pay the old man back for this. Behind the extremely disgruntled hero stands a smiling dean. Howard Draker leaves the classroom. The teacher expresses hope that everyone heard the dean's words. They immediately begin basic lessons, so the students must take their swords and go to the arena. The cadets make it clear that they understand the teachers. In front of us is an indoor special class arena. Zeke looks up somewhere. He could not imagine that even a special class would have to study the art of slaying dragons. We see a young man training in his past life. Simply because of his inability to use aura, he spent 2 years learning what would take an ordinary person 3 months. Zeke holds his head with his hand. He begs fate that this time everything will be much easier. In front of us is the back of the head of a blonde man who is facing the line of students. He greets the cadets. We see this young man from the front. It is reported that in front of us is the Knight of the Rose, Andre Draker. The teacher introduces himself and declares that he will teach the cadets the art of slaying dragons. The students are whispering excitedly. One of them asks who he is. The second notices that the teacher is very young. The third notices the official Draker uniform. We see several students and a piece of the teacher's cloak. Zeke remembers what he knows about him. Andre Draker is standing with his hand on the hilt of his sword. The hero knows that he is not a pure-blooded awakened, but he graduated from the academy early, after which he also graduated with honors from Valhalla. He is a genius born once in a century, who is given the name Draker. The hero has a sword hanging on his back. Zeke thinks that the teachers in the special class are truly outstanding. Andre Draker is also known for his unyielding character. The teacher looks at the cadets with a strange look and calls for silence. The young people look at him fearfully. Andre declares that if they have finished chatting, he will begin the lesson. The knight calls on the students to draw their swords. They do as they are ordered. We see the teacher's left eye. He asks the hero what kind of sword he has. The young man takes out his weapon and begins to actively wave it in front of him. Zeke holds it out with the blade up and declares that, as you can easily see, this is his training sword. Andre looks at the young man in amazement. He tells him to go out into the arena. Zeke and Andre stand opposite each other. The teacher asks if the cadet knew that the sword is selected based on the body's capabilities. The hero sighs heavily. He knew that this would happen, so he deliberately pulled out the sword to stand out. There is nothing to be done about it. Zeke, smiling, declares that he can defeat the teacher with this sword. The hero understands that it will be easier and faster if he immediately shows his skills. Andre looks at the impudent young man in bewilderment. A notification appears about the activation of indomitable mental defense. Andre, whose right eye glows ominously, looks at the hero. He places his hand on the hilt of his weapon and declares that he understands the young man. If he wants to learn this way, then nothing can be done about it. Zeke looks at Andre. He realizes that the teacher is provoking him. The teacher takes his sword out of its sheath. He declares that if the hero can at least touch his body with his blade, then he will free him not only from punishment for his rudeness, but also from lessons in the art of destroying dragons. Thick streams of red energy are visible above the teacher. We see his right eye. Andre asks the boy not to worry since he is not going to use the aura against him. Zeke smiles. He is surprised by this statement. He can defeat the enemy since he knows his weaknesses. Above the hero, we see the face of a character to whom he treats very hostilely. The boy thinks that Abel is watching him, so drawing attention to himself is quite dangerous. Zeke decides to just hit his opponent and then lose. He looks at the teacher, holding his sword out in front of him. We see a trace of the jump. The hero's weapon flies past the teacher's neck. We see the tip of the sword and a trace in the air. Zeke looks at his opponent in surprise, although this is exactly what he expected from the Blue Knight. Andre looks closely at the student. The hero understands that it will not be easy for him. Andre stands in the center, and the young man actively flies around him, trying to hit. The students watching the fight talk in surprise. One of them says that the official representative of the Draker Knights is at an absolutely unthinkable level. Zeke has not been able to hit him with his sword for half an hour. The hero looks at his opponent, who has put his hand to the side. We see that the sword that Andre is holding is shaking. Breathing heavily, the teacher looks at the cadet and cannot understand where this boy gets such endurance. Andre clenches his teeth from fatigue. He suppresses his aura, but even without it, losing to the cadet would still be shameful. We see the knight's concentrated face. He thinks that the existence of purebreds is truly unfair. The opponents stand opposite each other. Zeke thinks that Andre still has poor stamina, and the fact that he suppresses his own mana does not help him. The young man stares at the teacher. We see students studying in the hall, eating food and sleeping in a bed. Draker's aura cultivation method is known for its peculiarity. The aura is activated during training, performing everyday tasks, while eating and even while sleeping. This state becomes an integral part of life, like, for example, breathing. The guy looks closely at the knight. Roughly speaking, this means that Andre has almost stopped breathing. The opponent's swords collide, striking bright sparks. The hero understands that unconventional swordplay further reduces stamina. Andre reflects the cadet's blow, and he flies back. Zeke holds a huge sword with both hands. He thinks that losing like this is somehow not quite right. The young man takes off. It seems to him that there is nothing to be done and he must force the opponent to use aura. Zeke strikes, but hits the sword extended by the teacher. The young man thinks that using attacks that can be easily dealt with is useless. The hero jumps into the air. It seems that after the blow blocked by the teacher, Zeke flies far back again. The boy understands that he needs to do something that will force the opponent to use aura unconsciously. Most likely, it is necessary to create an extreme situation. Zeke flies down. One of his feet touches the ground. The boy makes 2 jumps. His opponent looks at what is happening in front of him in amazement. He seems to understand what move the hero is using. A notification appears about the activation of the skill Swift Steps. Andre realizes that this is really what he thinks about. Zeke moves along a complex trajectory around his opponent. He thinks that this is simply impossible. The critical strike skill is reported to have been activated. Zeke flies up to the teacher from behind. He cannot understand how the cadet could have learned about Swift Steps. We see the teacher's right eye. The approaching blade is reflected in it. Now we see the teacher's right leg. We see 1 silhouette of the hero and 5 silhouettes of his opponent. Andre raises his sword above his head. The Art of Dragonslaying, Chapter 1, Verse 1. A piece of sky. The hero smiles, holding his sword out in front of him. The battle area is filled with white energy. The students look on in shock. We see a huge crack in the sword blade. Zeke curses and thinks that this really was difficult. Blood flows from the corner of his mouth. The healing factor skill is reported to have been activated. The hero thinks that now he can pass out. He lets go of the sword and falls to the ground in front of his teacher. He puts his weapon back in its sheath. Andre, whose back we see, silently looks at the enemy. People with a stretcher run up to the hero. The teacher declares that this cadet may no longer attend classes. We see the platform where the battle took place from a great height. Andre asks if there are any more who want to be exempted. The cadets silently look at him. Looking sternly at them, the young man states that there are apparently none. He orders the students to raise their swords. Now they will see the real Draker's technique. In front of us is a sign with a red cross. The hero is lying on a hospital bed. He thinks that he did quite well. We see the orderlies running up to him again. Even though Zeke did not hit the knight, he forced him to use his aura and acknowledge his abilities. The young man lies smiling, closing his eyes. The teacher was punished in the end, and the hero got some free time. In other words, he was the winner. We see the hero's right eye. His opponent's last attack was the most basic technique in the art of killing dragons. Chapter 1, Verse 1, A Piece of Sky. We see the sword glowing above the teacher's head again. Now we see a powerful stream of energy stretching between the opponents. However, since this technique was used by the Blue Knight, its power was simply incredible. Be that as it may, the hero can still defeat the Blue Knight, given his limitless endurance and ability to heal. But this is not enough to live freely. There is a bird sitting on a branch in front of the hospital window. It is flapping its wings. Zeke thinks he doesn't know how, but he must acquire unstoppable strength. The bird is already flying high. This strength must be such that it will not allow anyone to subdue the hero. We see a smiling man holding a bottle in his hands. He approaches the guy lying on the bed and says that in front of him is Arthur's youngest son. The young man looks in amazement at his visitor, who is taking a sip from his bottle as if nothing had happened. Zeke cannot understand who the hell this is. The drunk smiles again, showing off his beautiful teeth. He says that the guy has exactly the same eyes as the arrogant bastard Arthur. Zeke does not understand why he did not sense this man, despite the fact that he smells so strongly of alcohol. Then it begins to dawn on him that the words about the arrogant bastard Arthur refer to the current head of the Drakers. The young man asks the man who he is. Without bothering to answer, he asks how the young man managed to do it. The unpleasant guy takes another sip from the bottle. Zeke thinks that this drunkard is taking too much liberty. Zeke asks what the man means. The man puts the bottle on the table and asks the hero not to pretend that he does not understand anything. He recently received a serious blow. We see a smiling young man, blood flowing from the corner of his mouth. The drunk looks at the young man menacingly and asks why his wound instantly disappeared. A drop of sweat runs down the guy's face. Zeke realizes that his interlocutor could have felt the effect of the healing factor. A notification appears about the activation of the indomitable mental defense skill. The hero grabs the sheet. He tries to control himself. The young man realizes that there is no one in the academy who knows about healing. Zeke sits down on the bed and declares that he does not understand what his visitor is talking about. He says that the hero, as it seems to him, is going to continue this useless show. The drunkard's hand flies straight into the young man's face. He ducks and manages to dodge. We see a pillow cut in two. Zeke tries to understand if the killer in front of him is a hired killer. Something not quite clear is visible in the air in front of the man. A sheet covers the hero's face. The enemy ironically notes that the young man has some interesting tricks in his arsenal. Zeke realizes that his instincts are simply screaming with alarm. We see a series of notifications about the activation of the skills Swift Steps, Precise Strike, and Critical Strike. Zeke flies forward, raising a huge sword above his head. He understands that if he does not kill this man, then he will kill himself. The sheet is now on the visitor's head. We see a crack in the blade of the sword. The guy looks at his opponent with fear. He says that the guy's ability to adapt to the situation is truly impressive. The man holds the blade of a sword, smiling. He says that this ability is exactly the same as the mercenaries. The man looks at the hero with glowing eyes. He tries to understand who the hell is in front of him. The hero stands 2 beds away from the unkempt drunkard, arms outstretched. Zeke peers at the visitor, trying to understand who he is. The man said something about a mercenary. The hero suspects that he knows something about his past life. The drunkard holds a huge sword on the tip of his index finger. He says that Draker dropped his sword and retreated. With a slight movement of his finger, he tosses the weapon. It appears in the hero's hands. The drunkard says that the young man is more suited to the role of a mercenary than a knight. Zeke realizes that he did not quite understand his interlocutor correctly a little earlier. The guy had not experienced anything like this since his training with the master. This became clear after a very short fight that had just taken place. There is a huge gap between the abilities of these 2 opponents, so big that if the man wanted, he could easily finish off the hero. He is at least a red knight. The unkempt visitor points his finger at the guy. He says that this claymore is from the basic set of the cradle. The man says that the young man is very talented, so it is not entirely clear why he is armed with this blade. Zeke realizes that his interlocutor is much stronger than the Red Knight. Some sounds are heard from behind the door of the hospital room. A hand in armored gloves lies on the door handle. Its owner says that he found who he was looking for. In front of us is Andre. The hero looks at him in bewilderment, not understanding what he is doing here. The teacher, meanwhile, calls the strange visitor Dexter a gardener. He cleans his ear with his little finger. Zeke cannot believe that he just fought a gardener. Andre slowly walks towards Dexter. The gardener asks how the knight knew he was there. He replies that he saw him in the training hall. Dexter says that the bastard is annoying him with his intelligence. Passing by the hero, the teacher says that if he is done with the treatment, he should return to his studies. Zeke, smiling, makes it clear that he understands. He He takes hold of the door handle, but at that moment he is called out from behind. It is the gardener, who says that if the guy has time, then he should not hesitate to run into the western greenhouse of the academy. Smiling happily, Dexter promises to teach him something useful. An awkward silence reigns in the hospital room. Smiling, the hero thanks him for the offer, but refuses to accept it. Behind the almost closed door, the gardener is visible waving his arms. He calls for just a look at this little bastard. He is as much of a bastard as Arthur. Having closed the door, the young man plunges into thought. He can't believe that the gardener is standing in front of him. Who is this Dexter trying to fool? The hero remembers how a drunkard called him Arthur's youngest son. Now we have Andre in front of us. Zeke thinks that if this gardener has the rank to call the current head by name, then he must be the same man who in his entire life had only one student, Andre. We see a warrior with glowing eyes. This is Duke Draker, the Storm Knight. The warrior walks towards the burning castle. He was one of the Black Knights who was so powerful that he could single-handedly take on an entire kingdom. They gossiped about him that he disappeared without reporting anything. Who would have thought that he secluded himself in the academy? The hero remembers how the gardener drank from a bottle standing by his bed. Perhaps Andre came here because of him. We see the hero in the window. The boy thinks that when they say Duke, they mean a person with frightening tenacity. Rumor has it that this character received the status of a Black Knight only because he liked the color black. We see a man with glowing eyes looking at a black sphere. Zeke tries to figure out if this is true or not. The boy remembers how he dodged a blow from a gardener. Now Duke is showing great interest in him, but getting easy training from this is what the hero needs. If he is going to learn something, he should at least learn his secret technique. We see the hero's face. He thinks that he needs to turn this interest into tenacity. Green leaves are flying above the academy building. In front of a chalkboard there is a teacher in glasses who asks the students if they know what happens in such cases. It is reported that he is a professor of magic theory Fanon. The cadets show no interest in the teacher's words. Fanon asks if no one will answer his question. He points his chalk at the board. He sighs in frustration and begins to say that when creating a mana form, damage can be taken due to resistance. Zeke, who seems to be the only one listening to the professor, raises his hand and says that he does not understand the law of energy transfer that he mentioned earlier. Fanon looks at this student in surprise. He adjusts his glasses and smiles brightly. The hero calls out to the professor in confusion. We see a window and two lamps on either side of it. Fanon apologizes for his emotions and says that this is the first time in his career that he has been asked a question. He then begins to explain the concept of mana transfer in detail. We see the academy building again. The cadets get up from their seats and head towards the exit. The young men do not understand why they are studying magic theory at an academy for knights. Zeke thinks that the lecture was quite easy to understand. He thinks that Fanon is an unusual professor. Someone calls out to the young man. He looks over his shoulder. The boy sees a teacher who is breathing heavily. Zeke asks the professor what happened. He says that nothing special. Smiling, Fanon scratches his cheek. He says that thanks to the boy, he had his first normal lesson in a long time. So if he is interested in anything, he can come to his lab at any time. The teacher graduated from the Delphoa University of Magic and knows a lot. Zeke looks at the teacher in surprise, as he thought, this is not an ordinary mage. But the boy did not even guess that he is a graduate of the Delphoa University of Magic, the country where magic was born. The boy says that he will probably take the professor up on his offer. The boy smiles. He thinks that there is nothing wrong with getting close to a mage. Zeke walks down the hallway with his hands in his pockets. He understands that mages who are good at math are usually flexible thinkers. They are much better colleagues than prim knights. The boy remembers the teacher standing at the board and thinks that he should definitely find out how useful he can be. Zeke looks at something in surprise. A familiar person is lying on the bench. The boy thinks that this gardener is less patient than he thought. Only about a week has passed since their last meeting. Dexter sneaks a look at the hero from under the green book. He asks if the little guy is ready. The man sits down on the bench. Zeke asks what brought him here. The man interrupts the boy and asks why he did not come to the greenhouse. Looking at the hero, Dexter says that he should have immediately understood what he meant when he said that he would teach him something useful. Zeke feigns mortal melancholy on his face and repeats that he is not interested in this at all. The gardener almost jumps up with indignation. He demands to know why. The hero raises his right hand. He states that he is perfectly aware of how good his interlocutor is, but now he has a lot of individual lessons. Dexter indignantly shouts that, of course, the guy should not be distracted from his lessons. He raises a finger, emitting streams of white energy. Dexter asks if Zeke really thought that he would say exactly that. The hero turns around. The next moment, he receives a powerful elbow to the back. White stripes are visible in the sky. Zeke holds his ear. He cannot believe that the gardener just knocked him out. Apparently, waiting a week was too much for this inadequate. It turns out that the young man is among the bushes and trees. He realizes that he is now in the western greenhouse. In front of us is a watering can. Someone calls the hero a baby and asks if he is awake. Dexter takes another swig from the bottle. Zeke asks if he really kidnapped him. Dexter sits down next to him and declares that this is exactly how it happened. Smiling crookedly, the drunkard says that the hero has really interested him. We see the young man's hand. Zeke realizes that his kidnapper is not going to hide anything. It seems that he is really impatient. The hero breaks away and runs away. We see that his swift step skill has activated. The young man thinks that it is not time for all this yet. Suddenly, he sees the face of his pursuer in front of him. Now the gardener is standing behind him with a bottle in his hand. Zeke looks at his hand in amazement. Dexter takes another swig from the bottle. The hero thinks that this man still does not take him seriously. He needs to somehow fix this situation. Zeke looks at the drunk with displeasure. He asks why he is so interesting to him. Dexter reminds him of his question, which remained unanswered. He wonders why the hero's serious wounds healed instantly. Zeke looks at his interlocutor in amazement. He smiles. The gardener's train of thought becomes more or less clear. The young man boldly says that if the gardener is so interested, he can try to beat an answer out of him. Dexter thoughtfully rubs his chin. In the place where he just stood, only a trace of the jump remains. Zeke is standing alone in the greenhouse. The guy realizes that Dexter has disappeared. The young man looks around, trying to find his pursuer with his eyes. A blurry sword appears behind the young man. Now the tip is aimed straight at the top of the guy's head. Zeke moves away from this weapon. The hero's hand lies on the hilt of the sword. We see someone's leg. The hero picks up his sword and asks the gardener what he's doing. Zeke sees a shadowy figure nearby. Dexter claims that the boy himself told him to beat the answer out of him. However, this is too easy, so they can make a bet. The gardener says that if the boy can touch him, he will grant him one wish. Zeke holds the sword with both hands. He thinks that the teacher and the student are incredibly similar to each other. Dexter looks at the boy with completely crazy eyes. He says that if the hero refuses, he will have to tell everything he is hiding. In front of us is a part of the roof of the greenhouse. The hero is standing in the middle of the greenery. Dexter, putting his fist forward, is breathing heavily. He does not understand what kind of boy is fighting with him. We see broken trees. The gardener realizes that 3 hours have passed. We see the fingers of someone's hand. Dexter sees that the hero has more than just good endurance. She never falls, and wounds are restored instantly. Zeke stands with a sword in his hand. Dexter frowns at him. Clouds of dust rise around the young man. The activation of the healing factor and infinite stamina skills is reported. Zeke looks at his opponent. He realizes that he can hold out like this all day, but he still will not win. The hero looks at the system window. The dragon's might skill seemed quite dangerous to him, so he had not used it before, but against the Black Knight, it seems to be what he needs. In front of us are legs. The opponents look at each other, both emitting purple energy. One of them says that the fight is continuing. Dexter smiles. He pays attention to the look of the young man. The gardener laughs loudly and says that this is exactly how a young man should be. Zeke takes a fighting stance. We see a bright purple glow. The activation of the swift step skill is reported. A sword mark is visible above the hero's head. Dexter, still smiling, looks at the hero. The gardener realizes that the enemy is repeating the same move. The guy is fast, but compared to Andre, the bastard, and the girl from the Turan family, he looks like some kind of turtle. Zeke grinds his teeth in rage. The gardener looks at him, sees this anger and understands that it surpasses tenacity. He really likes it. We see a glowing hand. Its owner thinks that it is worth using a little aura. The activation of the dragon's might skill is reported. A yellow eye is visible next to the gardener. The hero strikes with a sword, but the enemy parries it. Alarm appears in the man's eyes. He covers his face with his hand. The gardener tries to understand what is happening. Dexter looks around. He understands that the guy has deprived him of vision. However, it will be difficult for the young man to find the enemy. Zeke, with a sword raised to strike, is behind the man. We see his left eye glowing. The dragon vision skill is reported to be activated. We see a blade next to the gardener. The young man is behind the enemy. In front of us is a trace of a boot. Now we see a swirl of smoke in the air. The hero is standing on the path of the greenhouse. He realizes that this looks like Duke Draker's secret move. The guy looks to his left in surprise. He realizes that a simple jerk has caused a gust of wind. Perhaps this is why he is called the Storm Knight. The gardener's face appears behind the hero. Dexter, whose eyes are eerily glowing, hangs over the guy. He does not understand what is happening. The gardener approaches his opponent closely. He suggests that this duel end in a draw. Blood gushes from the young man's mouth. We see a fragment of his sword. The gardener strikes, causing clouds of dust to rise at a fairly decent distance from him. A notification appears that due to excessive skill usage, fatigue has exceeded the permissible limit. The exhausted guy is sitting on the ground. What just happened reminded him of his training with the master. A notification appears that for the sake of the hero's safety, his consciousness will be forcibly switched off. Zeke sees the outline of his opponent's figure blurring. Before us is a regular geometric pattern. Zeke, loudly groaning, holds his hand to the back of his head. The hero is sitting on the bed. He realizes that this is his room and guesses that Duke brought him here. The young man throws his head back and declares that he almost won. Zeke, putting his hands under his head, looks at the ceiling. He says that this is exactly what you would expect from the Black Knight. The hero stands with a sword in his hand and looks down. Zeke thinks that he has done everything he could at this point, but it is not enough. He tried to weaken the enemy's vigilance by repeating the same attack over and over again. And at the decisive moment, he wanted to strike him with the help of Dragon's Might and Dragon's Sight. But, alas, it was not enough. Here are a few more fragments from the battle that took place a little earlier. The skill that Duke used at the end was definitely his secret move. The hero really lost consciousness due to excessive use of dragon skills, but he was able to see his opponent's secret move. Here is the hero's eye, which glows with a bright yellow light. It is as if the gardener's skin had been peeled off. Zeke thinks that the physical manifestation of this move is the meaningless and incredibly fast movements that the enemy was able to use thanks to his extremely trained body. Dexter, smiling, puts his hand on Andre's shoulder. The hero thinks that it was this secret move that allowed Andre, who has very weak endurance, to rise to the level of the Red Knight. The young man looks at the ceiling absent-mindedly. He regrets missing the chance to learn the secret move, but it was worth it. We see the bright yellow eye shining behind the gardener's head again. The power of the dragon. It exerts such enormous pressure that it makes even the Black Knight hesitate. Most small fry would give up immediately upon encountering this skill. Judging by his facial expression, the guy notices something. A notification appears about an unread message. The window prompts him to open it. Zeke tries to figure out what it could be. There are several system messages in front of him. The skill Swift Steps, rank D, has been changed to the skill High Movement Speed, rank C. Your soul has evolved through the exercise of strong will. Along with the evolution of your soul, your system function is also activated. The following function can be activated using karma points. We see the hero's right eye. Several more system notifications pop up in front of the guy. The mini-map allows you to see the geographical features of the terrain. Locked, requires 20 points to unlock. Inventory, you can store as many items as you can fit. Locked, requires 20 points to unlock. The entry-level quest book includes a guide and quests for the effective development of low-ranking administrators. Locked, requires 45 points to unlock. Current karma points are 40. Zeke looks thoughtfully at the system windows. The abundance of information confuses him, but the guy finds the description of the inventory interesting. He clicks on the inventory activation option, deciding to see what it is. New system messages pop up. You have activated the inventory function. Select the items you need. They will be stored in the inventory. To retrieve an item from the inventory, you just need to think about it. In front of us is a standard plate with inventory slots. The amount of space occupied by an item in the inventory depends on its weight and size. To increase the size of the inventory, you can use karma points. The young man looks at the inventory. He is trying to figure out how to select the right item here. The boy's hand holds the hilt of the sword. He can activate skills simply by thinking about them, so placing items in the inventory most likely works the same way. The hero's hand holds the hilt of the sword tightly. The boy mentally repeats the save command several times. The weapon jumps out of the hero's hand. Zeke, raising his right hand, looks at his inventory. The claymore has disappeared and occupied 2 cells out of the 28 available. The hero understands what was meant by the message about the space occupied by an item, depending on the weight and size of the item. To retrieve an item, you need to think about it. Zeke apparently does what he learned, and the sword, just in the inventory, reappears in his hand. A smile appears on the boy's face. He thought it would be some kind of subspace storage, but everything is much better. Zeke is sitting by the fire. Naturally, this artifact was expensive, but finding something to store it was not easy. The sun is shining through the window. The hero thinks that he can also increase the space in his inventory by using karma points. In front of the hero's eyes is the low-ranking administrator status window. He thinks that the operational function only performs the function of a low-ranking administrator. He holds his sword in his hand again. The boy tries to figure out what will happen when he reaches a higher rank. If the value of these points is so high, then he should not throw them away thoughtlessly. The young man rubs his chin thoughtfully. He says that he will probably have to change his plans. The hero's room is shown from a great height. From behind the door, someone asks the young gentleman if he can come in. Zeke guesses that it is Decker. He allows him to come in. The man enters and stands in front of the hero. Zeke asks what happened. The servant says that he has a message. Decker hands over a folded piece of paper. The one who left the message said that the hero will understand who it is from when he hears the phrase from the gardener Dexter. The young man smiles. He understands that his previous performance cannot be called a complete failure. The text of the note to the kid, if he wants to fight again, suggests that he come at any time convenient for him. The hero remembers the end of the battle when the gardener suggested that the outcome be considered a draw. The young man understands that he still has the opportunity to find out about the secret technique of the enemy. The guy happily clenches his fist. Bowing, Decker says that he has one more thing to say. We see a sword with a deep crack. The servant says that he found the blacksmith his master mentioned. Zeke is surprised and asks when he will be able to see him. Decker adjusts his pince-nez. He says that this is exactly the problem. The blacksmith refused to meet with the hero. Zeke is surprised and asks why. In front of us is a typical country house. We see swords scattered everywhere. A completely drunk blacksmith holds a bottle in his hand. Decker says that this man is no longer engaged in the manufacture of weapons. A foot is on the carriage step. The hero looks at a rural house and thinks that he hasn't been here for a long time. We see a sign for a blacksmith called Papnir's Breath. The hero smiles and thinks that this is too grand a name for this workshop. A young man enters and asks if anyone is here. Graham's shining sword is a masterpiece created by Gallion Halbert. He said that it was the price for saving his life. It was said that his nickname, the Soul Blacksmith, was due to the fact that he read the souls of his clients before making a weapon for them. And he lived up to this title by creating a sword with the ability that the hero needed most. In front of us is a smiling blacksmith. We also see a wonderful weapon that he created. The ability mentioned above is changing ether to aura. Zeke looks with hostility at the young man drinking from the neck of a bottle. The boy wonders what happened to the greatest blacksmith on the continent who forged this sword. It is reported that this is the sole blacksmith Gallion Halbert. He looks at the boy in surprise and says that this boy should get out. This is no place for children. The hero stands in front of the table where the blacksmith is drinking alcohol. Although Gallion was quite picky, it never came to this. What happened to him before he met the hero? Zeke carries a bucket of water. He pours its contents on the blacksmith. The young man throws the empty bucket away. Zeke, smiling, raises his left hand and asks if the blacksmith has come to his senses. He looks at his visitor in amazement. Zeke says that he must explain why he rejected his offer. We see the blacksmith's hand. He calls the hero by his last name. Gallion slams his head on the table with all his might. He humbly asks to be forgiven for the mess he made here. We see that the guy's hand is shaking badly. Gallion asks to be forgiven for his insolence, but he is not taking orders now. How can a bastard create what someone else wants when he cannot make what he wants himself? Zeke looks at his shaking hand. He realizes that even Gallion had a similar period in his life, and if you think about it, he was already the greatest blacksmith on the continent when the hero met him. And Gallion never told us what kind of life he led before that. We see a young man enthusiastically forging a sword. The hero thinks that most likely he just did not want to tell that he had such a shameful past. Zeke turns away from the blacksmith, who clutches his head. He cannot wait 10 years for this man to come to his senses. Gallion bitterly sobs, calling himself a blacksmith who does not know how to do anything. The hero calls out loudly to him. The master standing at the table asks to forgive him for showing up in such a disgraceful state. Zeke declares that there is nothing wrong with it and asks to show a couple of his works. In front of us is the forge room. Gallion declares that he will take the guest to the backyard. He thinks that nothing can be done and that he will have to set the blacksmith on the right path. We see the chimney of a rural house. The blacksmith rubs his head thoughtfully. He apologizes and says that he shouldn't have left it all like that. We see hundreds of swords sticking out of the ground. The hero says that everything is fine and that the blacksmith did a pretty good job. The blacksmith thanks him for the compliment. Zeke approaches the weapons sticking out of the ground. He picks up one of the swords and examines it. The blacksmith loudly warns his guest to be careful. These blades are far from perfect, but they are still quite sharp. The young man throws aside one sword after another. He understands that they are not as bad as the blacksmith thinks. Their quality is no different from those he forged, becoming the best on the continent. The activation of the dragon sight skill is announced. The hero's face is reflected in the steel of the blade. The young man seems to understand what is going on. He asks Gallion if he has any problems with the brazier. The blacksmith looks at the boy in amazement. He looks at his back and asks him in a trembling voice how he found out. The boy says that he asked a question. Zeke clarifies whether the blacksmith really has a special smelting style. We see the master's right eye. The boy stands among a huge number of blades. He says that Gallion used several types of metal to create a lighter and more refined material. We see the tip of a sword. The weapon shatters into pieces in the hero's hand. Zeke says that the master was let down by its durability. The hero holds the upper part of the broken sword in his hand. He explains that this happens because the impurities found in the metals are not removed properly during the calcination process. The boy examines the now unusable weapon. Gallion thinks that the boy is right. He not only determined the smelting method used by the blacksmith, but also found the main flaw and its cause. The blacksmith clenches his fist. He calls the young man sir, asks him not to take it as rude, and says he would like to ask for something. Zeke, smiling, looks back at the master standing behind him. The hero approaches the table and asks what the blacksmith wants. He asks him to look at something. Galleon spreads a drawing on the table. The young men stand on either side of the table. We see the hero's hand against the background of a magical formation. The young man realizes that this is a drawing of the magic brazier, the blacksmith's secret, which he revealed many years later. The hero remembers his conversation with this character in his past life. Galleon asks if it is possible to hide something from the one who saved his life. It is a magical brazier, the temperature of which is maintained by magic, and this is his secret. Zeke, smiling, looks at the drawing and says that with this invention, the smelting method will become flawless. Galleon declares that this is true. He knew the hero would appreciate it. The boy asks why the blacksmith has not brought his invention to life if he already has a blueprint. Galleon looks at his interlocutor in surprise. The young men are standing at a table on which the blueprint is spread out. The blacksmith says that he needs a diagram of the law of mana energy, but the commission of the magic tower is 10,000 gold. Zeke looks at his interlocutor with sympathy. The young man thoughtfully rubs his chin. On average, a family of 4 spends 10 gold a month, that is, 1,000 times less. It will take the master 10 years to save up such an amount. The hero says that this is some kind of absurdity. Galleon replies that this is exactly why he turned to the young man. Zeke raises his left hand. The blacksmith says that he is from the Draker family and is also a purebred awakened. Galleon looks at the boy with pleading eyes and declares that if he helps him with the brazier, he will carry out any orders of the hero as long as his heart beats. Zeke stands in front of the table with a frown. He thinks that all this is rather complicated. It would be more realistic if he were the guardian knight of the family, but even for him, a pureblood, it is impossible to receive support in the amount of 10,000 gold. However, he cannot refuse Graham's shining sword either. We see the right eye of the young man. A joyful smile appears on the young man's face. He realizes that this is about the law of mana energy. Zeke rolls up the drawing. The guy says that everything suits him, and he agrees. The blacksmith, standing behind the young man, timidly asks if he heard right. Zeke says that everything is correct. He will find out something from a familiar mage, after which he will report the results. The young man heads for the exit and tells Galleon to stop drinking in any case. Tears and snot flow down the blacksmith's face. He humbly thanks his guest, promising that Galleon Halbert will faithfully serve its savior. Zeke tells the blacksmith to brush off the snot. The carriage drives away from the house. The blacksmith continues to thank the young man. He asks Galleon to stop humiliating himself and promises to contact him as soon as he learns anything. The hero passes by a building that is reportedly the research building of the Draker Academy. The guy does not understand why the bastards from the magic tower have such prices, because the design is not that complicated. The young man remembers the face of the magic professor. Fanon specializes in developing the laws of mana energy. His research lab is located somewhere in this alley. The hero, behind whom a sword is visible, looks up. It seems he notices something. The young man hears sounds coming from a little further down the street. We see several young people who look very suspicious. Now we see a crying cadet, humiliating himself by asking for forgiveness for what he did. We see the face of an enraged young man. He asks the sobbing boy to repeat what he said. The cadet, with tears streaming down his face, raises his head and asks Sir Leon Conrad for forgiveness. He says that he does not understand how a worthless person like himself dared to touch him. Leon steps on the back of the boy's head and slams his face into the ground. The scoundrel says that Zeke said wonderful words. Leaning his foot on the unfortunate man's head, the scoundrel declares that as a reward he will allow him to clean the ground that he has soiled. Behind the hero, we can see the students gathered in a circle, with the sobbing boy kneeling between them. The cadet calls the scoundrel Sir Leon Conrad and thanks him. Zeke, cursing foully, continues down the street. Leon brutally beats his victim. He screams that such parasites are a burden by the very fact of their existence in this world. The bastard puffs with rage and declares that the bastard Zeke is the same. Leon grabs the poor guy's hair. He asks again something about a previously unseen golden glow and the awakening of a pureblood who surpassed all the others. The bastard kicks the guy in the head. He screams hysterically that all this is nonsense. We see how Leon held the hero by the head. Now he lies motionless under the young man who defeated him. The scoundrel screams that he lost to this bastard because of a sudden attack, which he never expected from him. We see a completely insane face of the cadet. He screams that he cannot get his head around the fact that this bastard turned out to be a pureblood awakened. Behind the cadets who carried out the execution, a figure appears, in which we guess the hero. Zeke calls out to the bastard, calling him Freckle. The smile disappears from the hero's face. He looks menacingly at the bastard and declares that he has 3 seconds to take his hands off the unfortunate guy. Students have gathered in a narrow alley between 2 huge buildings. Leon, smiling, points his finger at the hero. He declares that he has become too arrogant since he woke up. He tries to say something else, but Zeke cuts him off mid-sentence. Putting his fist in front of him, the hero demands that the villain kneel. He looks at his opponent with fear. Streams of sweat are running down the bastard's cheeks. He does not understand what kind of terrifying pressure he feels. Leon looks at the ground in bewilderment. He thinks that just a couple of months ago Zeke was crawling at his feet, and now he is in his place. Grinding his teeth in rage, Leon asks how some inferior bastard dares to tell him what to do. The guy orders his companions to deal with the hero. They rush at the young man in a crowd. Zeke calmly declares that the attackers should not blame him for what happens to them, and calls him buddies. The fist that just flew at the hero's face flies past. The thug who delivered the blow looks at the guy in bewilderment. Zeke rushes to the attack and hits the cadet's arm with his elbow. The hero strikes and knocks the enemy down. Now he deals with 3 enemies at once. One by one, the cadets fly over the hero's head and fall to the ground with all their might. 2 more fly back, having received very painful blows. The guy's opponents fall to the ground one by one. We see how a stream of blood bursts from the mouth of one of them. Zeke somersaults and kicks another enemy in the jaw. Leon looks on in amazement at what is happening to his comrades. He thinks this just can't be happening. We see the upper half of the unconscious cadet's face. Leon begins to doubt that this bastard is really the Zeke Draker he knew. Having dealt with most of the enemies, the hero approaches the leader. He calls on him not to be afraid, although Leon probably guesses what awaits him. It will only hurt for a moment. A sword is pulled from its sheath. Leon, horrified, holds the weapon out in front of him and demands that the hero not come near him. He promises to cut him into pieces if he comes any closer. Zeke looks angrily at the bastard. He asks if he really drew his sword outside the arena. Doesn't he understand what this means? Leon looks at his opponent in shock. A deep cut is visible on the hero's cheek. Zeke declares that in order to counter the evil intentions of Leon Conrad, who drew his sword outside the sacred training arena, the bastard shouts at the young man to shut up. The hero holds out his sword and says that he, Zeke Draker, will gladly take all necessary measures and that this fight will end with the death of one of the opponents. Leon, trembling with fear and shedding streams of tears, looks at the hero. He declares that all responsibility falls on the loser and the winner is freed from remorse and any persecution. Zeke says that Liam Stone will be a witness. The scoundrel's servant, who, apparently, was beaten by the whole crowd a little earlier, raises his head and looks at the hero. Zeke turns to Leon and offers to continue, meaning, of course, a sword fight. His weapon scrapes on the ground. The scoundrel asks for forgiveness. We see the hero's left eye. The enemy throws the sword on the ground, calls the hero Sir Zeke Draker, and begs to leave him alive. Leon is on his knees, putting his hands to his forehead. He begs to let him go. We see the tip of the sword again. The hero remembers himself, beaten and humiliated. He then asks the scoundrel for forgiveness and begs to spare him. The hero looks at the enemy with a sword in his hand. In his mind, he calls him a stupid bastard. The young man strikes, the trace of which we see in front of the villain's face. Next to the bodies of the cadets he neutralized, a decent-sized ear falls. The hero says that he will take this body part from the villain as retribution. Leon screams in unbearable pain. The guy holds the place where his ear was just now flaunting. Zeke grabs the bastard by the hair and declares that if the ear is still there the next time they meet, he will be left without a head. Making a scary face, the hero looks straight into the eyes of his opponent. Then he slams his face into the ground. Leon lies in a pool of his own blood. The hero straightens up and sighs heavily. He walks past the defeated enemies. Someone calls him from behind. The guy turns around. The cadet standing behind the hero asks why he helped him. We see that it is Liam Stone. The hero says that you shouldn't think about it that way. Zeke, who has a deep cut under his eye, says that he didn't help this guy at all. The hero moves away from the young man. He thinks that he helped himself first of all. The young man rubs the back of his head thoughtfully. He tries to understand whether Galleon really affected him that much. The guy realizes that he almost said it out loud. We see tall buildings set against the backdrop of mountains. It is reported that we are in the Academy's research lab. Inside, someone asks the professor if this is possible. Zeke and Fanon are sitting at a table and looking at a drawing. The professor says that, if you get to the point, it should be possible. The hero says that if this is true, he would like to leave this drawing with the teacher. The teacher adjusts his glasses and asks the boy to wait. It would be better if he listens to everything first. Zeke and Fanon look closely at the drawing. The professor states that, as the hero said, the design is quite simple in principle. However, the problem lies in the core, which is responsible for the output power. The core is the heart of this machine, but the circuit has extremely complex limitations. We see a finger pointing to the drawing. The professor says that the core may be small, but it must be incredibly powerful, and they also need to come up with a way to regulate the output power. He has never encountered this before. The hero raises his right hand and asks if this is possible in principle. Fanon looks at the hero excitedly and says that it is. There are two options. Given the position of the core, he could adjust the drawing a little, but all this will probably take 10 years or maybe even 15. The hero, sitting on the couch, spreads his arms out to the sides. He asks again in surprise, is it really 15 years? The professor says that it really will take a lot of time. However, there is a second option. He dips a fountain pen into the inkwell. The professor says that it is possible to avoid changes and resort to some alternative, although it will also take a lot of time. Zeke, in front of whom there is an inkwell, looks at Fanon in surprise. He says that the item they need is a high-density mana stone. The young man jumps up excitedly. He asks again in amazement, after which he says that this is an ancient artifact that cannot be created using modern technology. Fanon confirms his words and states that it is indeed an ancient and rare relic. In front of him is some object emitting streams of greenish energy. The professor says that there are artifacts that are much more difficult to find than the mana stone, which they need according to the available drawings. It can be purchased for 3,000 gold. We see the back of a young man. Most of the people around him think that he is using an aura after what happened during the blessing ceremony, but it was just the statue's reaction caused by the ether and healing. He still can't use aura. Ether is considered to be a force that is difficult for humans to control. He can't use any sword skill that requires aura, except for the soul spirit skill, but even that only allows him to strengthen his body and change the position of the sword in space. That's why he needs Graham's shining sword. The hero holds the magnificent weapon he just described in such detail. Before us is the eye of a young man. Cursing, he wonders where he can get that stinking stone. Fanon looks at the hero, who is deep in thought, smiling. He admits that the creator of this blueprint is an amazing person. Even taking into account the very complex core, the design is incredibly effective. The professor places his hand on the blueprint. He states that something like this is very difficult to find even among the relics of the Golden Age. Hearing these words, the hero smiles and raises his head. A relic of the Golden Age. Why didn't he think of that himself? Zeke stands up and rests his hands on the table. The hero asks the professor to take care of the plans until he returns. The boy heads for the exit. Fanon asks in amazement what this all means. Is this a hint that he should kill 15 years on this project? He laughs and says that of course not. Zeke holds onto the strap with his hand. He turns to the professor and, smiling, says that he will get him a high-density mana stone. In front of us is a dragon. The Golden Age. A warrior with a huge sword prepares to fight the dragon attacking him. The Liberation War, during which people tried to escape from the power of dragons, ended with Tarakan defeating the evil dragon Bahamut, giving humanity centuries of peace. We see a huge amount of treasure. Then the ancient relics discovered in the Dragonslayer were remnants of the era of the Hero King, the rise of magic. All the relics, technology, and magic discovered were superior to modern standards. Among them was a high-density mana stone capable of satisfying the mana needs of an entire village, a relic from the age of the Hero King. In front of us is a huge white building. It is reported to be the central library of the Draker Academy. We can see sheets of some kind of book. The central library is rarely used, but it is maintained because it is believed to have been founded by Tarakan himself. During the expansion of the archive buildings, relics from the Golden Age were discovered here. Because of this, the Magic Tower and the Archmage of Nirvana, a member of the three great families, joined the excavation. In a few months, countless relics from the Golden Age were found, and the news was spread in the Continental Information Herald. All this should happen in 10 years. Zeke, with his hands in his pockets, walks through the huge archive of the Central Library. He thinks that no one has discovered the relics yet. Nothing is known about them yet. The hero peeks out from behind the shelves. He states that you can search for the entrance all day and still not find it. A notification appears about the activation of the Dragon Vision skill. The hero's eye glows with yellow energy. He walks through the library between the bookcases. It seems that the guy notices something. Zeke notices a tile that is different from all the others and realizes that this is exactly what he needs. The hero knocks on the tile. He thinks that if the sound is dull, then he found what he was looking for. The guy gets the desired result. The guy's right hand is enveloped in a purple glow. He uses the skills Spirit Soul and Slash. The only use for Ether is the Spirit Soul skill he learned from his master. One of the floor tiles stands out from the others. Since Ether materializes the user's will, certain properties can be applied to it. But everything has its drawbacks. The user must expend a large amount of Ether to perform any action. Gritting his teeth in pain, the guy covers his left eye. He says that using Spirit Soul is very difficult. We see a yellow spark. The hero falls through the floor. The hole in the floor is immediately covered with a tile. We see a torch. The hero walks down a dark passage with a torch in his hand. He states that the information bulletin did not write that it would be so deep here. Zeke looks anxiously to his right. Skeletons are wandering along the dark corridor. It will take at least 10 years before these ruins are found. The hero peers out from around the corner. He tries to figure out if someone could have found this place earlier. We see skeletons holding entrenching tools. Zeke identifies them as shovels and pickaxes. The boy realizes that it was not the lick who did this. A glowing sword appears in the boy's hand. The critical strike skill is activated. The young man pounces on the skeletons and kicks the pickaxe out of one of them. He thinks that he should be able to deal with these opponents quite easily. Zeke cuts off the head of one of the skeletons. The shovel flies up. The hero looks at the system window in surprise. Several messages appear. For destroying 2 skeletons, you receive 2 karma points. Skeletons destroyed, 2. Current number of karma points, 22. The young man has a happy smile on his face. He remembers that he can actually get points for destroying monsters. It completely slipped his mind because he was focused on the artifacts. Zeke sticks out his tongue. He thinks that maybe now is the time to earn points. Zeke runs forward, raising his sword above his head, shouting that he will now get enough karma points. The skeleton's head breaks into many pieces. We see 2 more system messages. For destroying 1 skeleton, you received 1 karma point. Skeletons destroyed, 20. The young man destroys enemies without taking his eyes off the system window. He says that it is all easy peasy. In front of him is a low-ranking administrator status window with a lot of relevant data. The young man looks at the information about the character's system functions and skills. Zeke thinks that he should see what can be unlocked here. The entry-level quest book is 45 points, the minimap is 20, the dragon skill devourer and the second-level dragon skills are worth 50 points each. The hero touches his finger to the system window. He says that, well, he will take the minimap now. A notification appears about activating the minimap function. Zeke sees a map of the area in front of him. He thoughtfully covers his mouth with his fingers. The boy says that it looks like a magic map. His attention is drawn to the oval torn in the middle. Zeke tries to understand what it is. A message appears about converting the minimap from 2D to 3D. The hero stands in front of the volumetric model. He smiles happily. The boy gives one compliment after another. The hero touches the orange parallelepiped with his finger. He tries to understand why this room is highlighted in a different color. A system window appears, asking if the boy wants to know how to get to the selected place, burial of the Dragonslayer, storeroom. Amazement appears on the hero's face. He does not understand what storeroom they are talking about. The boy presses his finger on the yes option. The boy remembers that it took the search party several days to find it. He easily determined the location. The system informs that the boy will now be offered the fastest route to the destination. Zeke looks at the volumetric model in surprise. The plan shows the route. The boy laughs and says he can't believe it. How could he get lost in such a place? We see white lines on a blue grid. A notification appears that the hero has arrived at his destination. The boy stands in front of a giant gate. He seems to have arrived, but he doesn't understand how to get inside. The hero touches the barrier with his hand. He says that this gate won't open that easily. A red glow appears under his hand. Some kind of emblem is visible on the gate. Zeke raises his left hand. He understands that he is dealing with a protective spell. We see a man in a hooded cloak with an emblem on his back. The reason the Magic Tower and the Archmage of Nirvana were attracted must have been because of this door. Zeke looks at his hand. He thinks that he would have lost it if he hadn't had a glove on it. The boy looks at the giant door. He says that he cannot cope with the spell and asks the system to open it. The hero sees system messages. We have received an administrator request. We will connect to the security device. The protective spell is deactivated. Failed to activate the automatic device. Activate the manual device. The guy looks at the blue windows in amazement. We see the hero's eye, which reflects the system window. Zeke asks the system in amazement if it really reacts to his words. A message appears with the answer, yes. Do you have any other wishes, Administrator Zeke Draker? The guy seems to be stunned. It slowly dawns on him that he can talk to the system. We see the back of the young man. He decides to ask the system why it made him regress. The soulless interlocutor replies that he cannot answer this question. Zeke looks at the blue window and asks what kind of administration system is used. He again hears that it is impossible to answer this question. We see the profile of the young man. He asks the system who created it. She again answers that she cannot answer this question. Then she asks if the administrator Zeke Draker has any more questions. The young man sighs heavily and rubs the back of his head. He curses silently, realizing that the system has not answered a single important question. Looking at the huge gate, the boy asks the system to simply open the gate. 2 notifications appear. The administrator's request has been confirmed. The burial place of the Dragonslayer, the pantry is open. The giant gate opens. Clouds of dust rise around the young man. He sees very interesting objects on the shelves and realizes that these are all treasure chests. We see a joyful young man looking into a chest. These boxes are filled to the brim with valuable relics and treasures. Finding even one relic would be almost a miracle. The hero's hand opens the lid of one of the chests. It turns out that it is filled to the brim with gold. The guy laughs loudly as he sees incredible wealth. There are scattered chests in front of us. Zeke realizes that he is incredibly lucky and decides to take the treasures to give them to Fanon. The guy has a joyful smile on his face. He declares that he has finally found what he was looking for. In front of him is a small chest with items that resemble old TV tubes. Zeke declares that these are high-density mana stones. There are 4 of them and it is simply amazing. The young man decides to expand his inventory by 4 slots for 1 karma point. The young man realizes that there is not enough space in his inventory for everything anyway. 2 mana stones fall down. The hero smiles happily and looks at the system window. He asks if he will have to come here until he graduates. Zeke puts on his backpack. He says that is enough for today. The young man seems to notice something. Clouds of purple smoke swirl around him. Zeke peers into the fog. He cannot understand what this ominous feeling is. His hand generates energy waves. The boy looks at his glowing hand in fear. Magic formations are visible around his body. The boy tries to understand what it is. It looks like he is disappearing. Zeke is kneeling on the ground. Looking around anxiously, the boy asks the system where he is. Columns are visible around the boy. He learns that the administrator's current location is the Dragonslayer's house. Zeke looks up. He repeats what he heard, and then says that the information bulletin did not write anything about a room filled with coffins. The boy calls up the mini-map. The hero touches the blue window with his hand. Now he rubs his chin thoughtfully. Zeke realizes that he is not far from where he was before, but there is no direct passage to the Dragonslayer's house. If so, then this may be a hidden area that has never been found before. The young man pushes back the heavy lid and states that he cannot just leave this place. The tomb he opened contains a knight in armor. A message appears stating that the young man has discovered exclusive Dragonslayer gear. The hero's hands are on the dead knight's armor. He examines the armor from all sides. Zeke states that the exclusive Dragonslayer gear is different from the Golden Age armor. The hero sees some kind of hole in the back of the armor. He tries to understand what he sees. The young man's face is filled with surprise. He involuntarily utters a curse word. Smiling, the young man lifts his armor and declares that he cannot just let this opportunity pass. A notification appears stating that Zeke has installed a mana battery into the exclusive Dragonslayer equipment. We see the item in question. It is reported that the equipment has been activated. A green light lights up in the slot of the knight's helmet. The hero smiles. It seems that the knight has come to life. The boy looks at him in surprise. Sincere surprise is noticeable in the young man's eyes. Zeke asks what happened. Plumes of green smoke rise. The system reports that the overload caused by the equipment failure has led to an activation failure. It estimates that an explosion will occur in a few moments. The hero is advised to take cover. Zeke looks at the armor falling in front of him in disappointment. Addressing the system, he ironically states that it, of course, warned him just in time. The system apologizes in response. The young man looks at the smoking armor with interest. He understands that the source of energy for it is a high-density mana stone. The hero looks at something carefully. He thinks about what features this armor must have had if it required such a powerful energy source. The young man decides that he will ask Fanon about this later. For now, he continues walking through the room he is in, declaring that he will continue his search. The hero stands in a huge empty hall. He says that all the other rooms are empty, and this is the last one. Zeke stands with his hands in his pockets. The glass cube in front of him is the only thing in this huge room. The young man looks at the system window. His eyes are almost bulging out of their sockets. Beads of sweat are running down the young man's face. He calls Tarek Draker a crazy asshole. In front of us is a dragon with black smoke rising from it. The system reports that the legacy of Tarek Draker has been found, the heart of the cursed dragon Bahamut. In front of us is the artifact in question. Zeke cannot believe that Tarek left the heart of the slain dragon as a gift. This explains the ominous feeling he experienced when entering the storeroom. We see the backpack on the guy's back. In front of us is the hero's hand. He is now experiencing completely different feelings. The system reports that the heart of the cursed dragon Bahamut is reacting to the administrator. In front of us is a part of the hero's uniform and black streams. Either fear or amazement appears on the young man's face. He hears words. Yes, I hear you. Yes, I had no choice. Yes, I understand. Yes, I will kill them all. We see the hero's eye. The activation of the indomitable mental defense skill is reported. The hero's eyes are now closed. Wisps of smoke rise upward. Zeke again hears the phrase about the need to kill them all. The guy looks at something in fear, covering his right eye with his hand. He does not understand why this is happening to him. The young man removes his hand, and we see that the eye is either gone or has become very black. Zeke is standing next to the light cube. He asks what the hell is this? The room the hero is in is filled with jets of black energy. A powerful purple flash occurs. The hero does not understand what is happening here. The system reports an urgent quest, the Tarek Draker trial. You need to get rid of a strong curse emanating from the heart of Bahamut. Reward: ownership of Terrakin's dying gift. The young man looks at the system message in amazement. We see the hero's black eye. Notifications appear. One of them indicates the activation of the Indomitable Mental Defense skill. The second immediately reports an error and the impossibility of activating this skill. The entire space around the hero is filled with black jets. We see the hero's hand and a burning red light under it. Someone tells the boy in the most terrifying way that he needs to kill them all. If he obeys, he will be free. The hero slams his face into the cube that stands in front of him. He has a smile on his face. Zeke says that whoever is telling him all these things should stop mumbling, because it is incredibly annoying. The boy asks if he really is going to grant him freedom. We see two faces opposite each other. The hero, whose face is running with blood, says that freedom is usually earned, and calls his interlocutor a stupid bastard. Something above the boy's head collapses, shards fall right on him. The system informs that the hero has overcome the dragon's curse. He has completed the urgent quest. As a reward, the boy received the right to own the dying gift of Terrakin. The exhausted hero leans his hands on the floor. He thinks that everything could have been worse. He did not even think that the skill would fail him. The boy wonders what that was all about. More system messages appear. The healing factor skill is activated. The infinite stamina skill is activated. You have begun to absorb the heart of the cursed dragon Bahamut. The young man, with sweat and blood running down his face, is amazed. We see a glowing dragon heart in front of him. The boy opens his mouth and starts screaming. The hero cannot understand what is happening now. In the end, he realizes that a pure and dense source of mana is penetrating him. The cube that was standing on the stand shattered into pieces. We see the hero's eye. Apparently, the dragon's heart flies straight into his chest. Zeke realizes that he does not have any circles to receive mana. Without a place to store it, all this mana will destroy his body. He must do something urgently. We see powerful streams of energy and a tiny figure of the hero. The young man's hand emits a purple glow. A purple ball hangs in front of the boy, who is grinding his teeth from unbearable tension. Zeke uses his spirit soul and seal skills. We see the dragon's heart, which emits thick streams of energy. The hero thinks that he will use the ether to hide the mana and seal it in the ether hole. There is enormous tension on the young man's face. Not far from the stand on which the white cube stood, a powerful explosion is heard. The ground cracks, clouds of smoke rise up. In front of us is a deep funnel. It is scary to look at the hero. Rays of light break through from his body. We see the lower part of the young man's face. He sighs with relief and looks at his hand. Zeke says that it seems that he is still alive. Two huge funnels are visible next to him. The young man stands with his hands in his pockets. He sees that the heart is gone. The guy stands in front of the stand from under the cube. He thinks that this mana really seemed to belong to Bahamut. The young man notices something. His chest is reflected in one of the remaining fragments. The boy brings his hand to the image of some strange creature that appeared on his chest. Zeke says that it most likely appeared because he sealed Bahamut's mana. The boy looks at something in amazement. In front of him is a system message that he absorbed the heart of the cursed dragon Bahamut. In front of the boy are system windows. We see the notifications that he is reading. The absorbed mana changed the administrator's body. The administrator's physique has been changed to a divine body. We have detected a power that you are 95% unable to control. A portion of this power has been compressed and sealed. As the heir, you have the right to open the protected library of Terrakin Draker. The entry-level quest book has been unlocked. The low-level administrator's manual has been provided. Zeke rubs the back of his head thoughtfully, trying to understand what the hell terms like divine body, protected library, and manual mean. Eventually, he comes to the conclusion that he can study all this later. The guy thinks that he should minimize all the windows now. Judging by his eyes, he notices something that makes him abandon this idea. The hero's hand reaches for the blue window. Zeke, smiling, rubs the back of his head. He says that it seems that his ancestor was in a generous mood. In front of the guy, there is a system message. Do you want to open another dying gift of Terrakin Draker? Zeke sees two notifications. Admin request confirmed. We will now open the second dying gift of Terrakin Draker. The guy looks ahead in surprise. A bead of sweat runs down his cheek. It seems he understands what he got. In front of us is a tall building. It is a platinum mansion. We see the hero's hand and the items in the locker. The guy says that this should be enough. He closes the locker and looks at the system window. The guy calls up the low-ranking admin status window and begins to examine it. He sees information about the dragon skill. The spell cast by the hero is reported to be filled with power. It is blocked because the administrator does not have enough experience at the moment. The young man runs his finger across the system window. Analyzing the information, he pays attention to the points about power and constitution. This is something new for the young man. It seems that the spell can be unlocked as soon as he becomes stronger. We see a description of the menu items that caught the hero's attention. Power, dragon control. The dragon race is at your command. You can summon dragons under your control, and they will carry out your orders. Constitution, divine body. Your body is capable of operating at the highest level. The speed of preparing for battle and the speed of transmitting ether inside the body have increased. Without stopping to work with the system, Zeke goes somewhere. He thinks that the descriptions, frankly speaking, did not help him much. We see the system windows that popped up in front of the young man a little earlier. Zeke realizes that a status window has also appeared, connected not with the second dying gift, but with Terrakin itself. The young man sits on the parapet and asks the system to open a window connected with Terrakin. The hero learns that in order to open the protected library of Terrakin Draker, it is necessary to update the information. Surprised, repeating the words about the protected library of Terrakin, the young man presses his finger on the system window. He sees 2 new messages. Move to a place where it is possible to update the information. Do you want to see a mark on your minimap? The hero asks if he really needs to go somewhere and asks the system to show him the place. A red mark is visible on the minimap that pops up before the hero's eyes. Zeke seems to understand what this place is. His eyes widen in surprise and he asks if this is Valhalla. In front of us are 2 crossed maces. It is reported that Valhalla is the most prestigious educational institution for training knights. Outsiders, except for administrators, are prohibited from entering this territory. Zeke, whose back we can see, thoughtfully rubs the back of his head. He says that even he would have problems entering Valhalla, and that is why he was not going to do it. A dragon's heart is visible above the young man's head. The boy thinks that since there is something connected with Terrakin's dying gift there, then perhaps it is worth changing his plans a little, even if it means continuing to be part of this damned family. The hero's hand continues to work with the system messages. A notification appears that the entry-level quest book has been activated. We see what this system window looks like. 2 more messages appear. Low-level admin training will begin soon. At the end of the training, a quest will be given that will help develop the admin. Once the quest is completed, you will receive a reward. Zeke looks thoughtfully at the brown window. The item about receiving a reward upon completing the quest reminds him of adventurer guild missions or mercenary quests. However, what kind of training is this? The system informs that low-level admin training is starting. Zeke is very surprised. He looks over his shoulder. The young man is kneeling on one knee. Strange white bubbles are visible around him. Standing on the topographic grid, Zeke turns his head, trying to figure out what this place is. He remembers how he was teleported recently, and he realizes that this most likely happened to him again. Although this time it is different. It feels like this place is different from the last time. We see the back of the young man. Zeke looks to his right and notices scary orcs, one of which is holding out a spiked club towards him. In front of us is the hero's right eye. The system announces that a training quest has begun. You need to defeat monsters within the allotted time using 2 or more different skills. Reward, karma points, unlocking the system's storage. Time, 60 minutes. A sword appears in the guy's hands. He thinks that he encountered a sudden appearance of orcs and immediately received a corresponding quest. Is the training trying to create situations in which he could take advantage of the system? The monsters begin to attack the young man. He thinks that it would be nice if there was something like this in his past life. We see 3 orcs and a mark from a blow. The system announces the activation of the skills Swift Steps and Slash. The hero's eyes, behind whom the orcs are visible, glow purple. The monsters angrily bare their huge teeth. In front of us are fragments and streams of blood. The hero feels that the claymore has become light as a feather. We see a system message. Physique, divine body. Your body is capable of operating at the highest level. The speed of preparing for battle and the speed of transmitting ether within the body have increased. Zeke holds a bloody sword in his hands. He is trying to understand if this is also a result of the divine body. With it, he will be able to defeat the Purple Knight with ease. The system reports the completion of the training quest. In front of us is a purple piece of cloth. The hero is standing with a sword on a spacious platform. It seems to him that he has returned to where he was. The sword that was in his hand dissolves into thin air. The guy understands that all of this was an illusion, although everything that happened seemed incredibly real. The guy sees more system messages. You have received a critical bonus. You have received a time bonus as a reward for completing the quest. You have received 40 points and access to the store. The young man looks at the blue window and says that he seems to have received the opportunity to buy items through the system. This is simply incredible. A window with an image of 4 items opens in front of the hero. Zeke points out the flesh of the giant and the breath of the fire giant. Smiling, the young man extends his finger to the system window. He states that here you can buy rare relics that cost a fortune to buy. Perhaps he will make a lot of money if he resells them. We see a window, a large part of which is taken up by a huge sword. The hero sees more system messages. Please place the item you want to sell in this window. You can also sell items that are in your inventory. Training Claymore, this item cannot be sold. Elven dagger, do you want to sell this item? Cost, 4 points. Zeke rubs the back of his head thoughtfully. He realizes that it seems that he can only sell ancient relics, and 4 points seems too low a price to him. At the auction, this item can fetch 100 gold. The young man swipes the system window away. He says that he is unlikely to use this function. Zeke stretches tiredly. He states that today has been a very difficult day. We see a lantern. In front of us is a half-open door, from behind which someone says that it looks like he will get a good night's sleep today. We see an impressive building. It is reported that this is the professor's research center at the Draker Academy. Fanon stands with his back to the hero. He asks how he was able to find a high-density mana stone in just one day. The hero wearily states that it would take a long time to explain. The boy takes a cup of tea. He suggests that they forget about this question and asks how long the work will take. The hero hears that everything is ready. Zeke looks at the professor in amazement and says that this is simply incredible. The professor states that it is even more incredible that the boy managed to bring high-density mana here, which he is holding in his hands. The young man takes a sip from the cup, looking at the teacher. It seems to him that the professor does not really trust him. A page of some book is reflected in the man's glasses. Fanon thinks that whenever high-density stones are found on the continent, they are registered using various ancient texts and a title deed is issued for them. In front of us is a familiar object, reminiscent of an old television lamp. Thus, by checking the registration number, one can find out where and when the mana stone was found, as well as its current owner. But the stone in his hands is not registered anywhere. The teacher's hand is lying on a rather thick book. It is reported that in front of us is the Encyclopedia of Registration of High-Density Mana Stones of the Central Continent. Zeke puts his empty cup on the saucer. He thinks that Fanon cannot find the corresponding entry because the stone was found very recently, and by the hero. However, the ability to doubt and not blindly believe, as well as the prudence and skill of the professor, command respect. The young man approaches Fanon. He asks if they can now, after checking the registration number, go where they planned. Fanon begins to ask the hero another question. He thinks that the professor is too talented to rot in a place like this. In front of us is a forge called Papnir's Breath. Inside, someone says that he will try to start it. We see a hand reaching for a green magical formation. Puffs of smoke and white magical circles are visible in the air. Zeke and Fanon watch Gallion Halbert work with his device. The blacksmith's face shows genuine joy. Zeke and Fanon also smile. The professor says that he has to be at a lecture and begins to say goodbye. In front of us are doors with narrow slits for windows. The hero thanks the professor. The blacksmith, smiling happily, walks out the door. He says that he did not even hope to see the finished magical brazier in his lifetime. Gallion sincerely thanks the young man. He replies that this is part of the deal, so there is no need to thank him. Zeke reaches into his backpack and expresses hope that the blacksmith has not forgotten the agreements that existed between them. Gallion says he hasn't forgotten anything and will do whatever the hero says. The young man shows something to the blacksmith and asks him to turn it into a sword. Gallion looks at what the young man is showing him in amazement. He recognizes the object and calls it a dragon's fang. We see that the elegant case does indeed contain a sharp tooth. The system reports that this is the sharpest fang of the cursed dragon Bahamut. Gallion looks into the case and is amazed that he has never seen a fang of this size before. He asks where the young man got it. The sharp tooth is lying on a pillow inside the box. This is the second dying gift from Terrican Draker. The young man remembers that Terrican was an avid collector. Zeke winks and says that he doesn't even know what to say. The blacksmith, whose entire body is trembling, bows deeply to the young man. Snot is running from his nose. Gallion states that Zeke has created a magical brazier and has entrusted him with the creation of a weapon from a dragon's fang. The blacksmith smiles and clenches his fists tightly. He promises to exceed all of the hero's expectations. The young man places his fist to his chest and, looking forward with enthusiasm, declares that he, Gallion Halbert, will create a blade for the boy even at the cost of his own life. The hero thinks that of course he will, after all, he saved him. Zeke remembers how the same character in his past life said the same words. Another image from the past, the hero extends his hand to the master. He declares that this is somehow too pompous and that he should not say anything like that. The young man understands that the blacksmith has not changed at all. The hero smiles. He tells the blacksmith that he relies on him. Zeke walks away from the forge with a smile on his face. He wonders what kind of sword Gallion will create this time. The boy is simply burning with impatience. The blacksmith holds a hammer in his hand. He has already started working. Zeke's room, Platinum Mansion. The hero, sighing heavily, complains about the enormous effort he has put into creating the sword. He remembers his fight with the gardener and the note he received from him. A week has passed since receiving that message. The young man understands that sooner or later something must happen. He seems to notice something. We see the edge of a boot. The gardener is standing in the doorway of the room. He asks why the kid didn't come to him. Zeke, a drop of sweat rolling down his cheek, smiles. Duke looks angrily at the young man and demands to tell the truth. The hero understands that this man wants to kill him. The young man puts out his left hand to the side. He says that the gardener told him to find him if the hero wants to challenge him again. The reason he didn't show up was because he wasn't eager to fight. Duke grabs the boy by the chest. He says that he demanded that the hero reveal the truth. Zeke grinds his teeth from the tension. The gardener throws the boy away and he lands in the open doorway. The boy staggers to his feet. He looks at something in horror. Zeke sees a fountain and flower beds below him. The boy flies up to the stone railing. He thinks that if he falls from such a height, he will die before he can heal. We see the young man's hand. The gardener grabs him by the collar again. Duke holds the boy by the neck. He asks if he has any desire to challenge him again. He will never believe that the young man does not know about his intentions. Most likely, everything is exactly the opposite. We see that the hero is on the balcony of the top floor. Duke accuses him of not showing up either after the proposal back in the ward or now after receiving the note. One gets the feeling that the boy is doing this out of spite. Zeke, blood flowing from the corner of his mouth, thinks that the gardener is just playing with him. The man looks at the boy angrily and says that he has 5 seconds and it would be better if he confessed everything in that time. Zeke, smiling, looks at the gardener. On the count of 5, he says that he is very funny. Duke holds the boy by the throat and says the number 4. Judging by the expression on his face, the gardener is very determined. He says the number 3. The hero tells him that he did not even say who he really is. The number 2 is said. Despite the fact that the hand is on his throat, Zeke smiles. He declares that he told the truth and calls his opponent the gardener Dexter. The man smiles. He throws the hero from the balcony into the room and he somersaults inside. The boy hits his head on the wall, leaving an impressive dent in it. Duke says that the kid is absolutely right. He holds out his hand to the boy and says that he was once the Black Knight Draker. Zeke tries to understand what once upon a time means. A man stands over a guy sitting by the wall and introduces himself as Duke Draker. The young man places his hand on his chest, closing his eyes and respectfully lowering his head. He states that he offers his sincere apologies for disrespecting a member of his family, the noble Black Knight. The man points his finger at the young man in surprise. Cursing, he states that it seems the hero planned all of this in advance. Zeke, smiling, replies that nothing of the sort happened. The young man watches the gardener walk away. He says that Mr. Duke himself said that he was once a Black Knight. The gardener indifferently replies that none of this matters. He once was, but not anymore. Zeke looks to his left. He asks in surprise if this is possible. We see the young man from behind the gardener's leg. The young man states that he knew it was possible to rise, but not to fall. The gardener, whose shoulder we can now see, suggests that the young man end this conversation. We see that his hand is shaking. Zeke says that he understands everything. He puts his hand to his chest and says that since Mr. Duke confessed everything to him, he will also tell the truth. We see a door leading to the balcony. Duke says that the guy already knew who was in front of him. The young man is kneeling in front of a man sitting on the couch. The latter says that the young man was deliberately asking for trouble because he wanted to become his apprentice. Zeke confirms that this is exactly how it happened. A smile appears on the gardener's face. He says that the guy has plenty of nerve. Duke raises his hand and declares his consent. We see the satisfied face of the man. He says that he will accept this young man as his apprentice. The hero looks at his interlocutor in shock. He cannot believe that everything worked out so easily for him. The young man gets up from his knees. Before the gardener changes his mind, the guy needs to act. The hero gets down on one knee in front of the Black Knight sitting on the couch. He calls him Duke Draker, the noblest of knights, and then declares his intention to become his apprentice. With his teacher's help, he will gain wisdom and strength to bring glory to his mentor's name. The boy vows to do his best. The Duke, smiling, interrupts him and states that the little rascal even knows about the apprentice's oath, which very few people use nowadays. The youth, humbly looking down, declares that culture is an essential virtue for a knight. The Duke calls him a cunning little snake. Zeke says that he will take this as a compliment. The young man looks up, calls the gardener master, and asks if he can ask something. The gardener replies that he is a little embarrassed to be called master, but the youth can continue in the same spirit. Before us is a green field and flowers. Zeke asks what made the knight take him as an apprentice. We see the knight from behind. The Duke was known for not accepting anyone. Only Andre, the genius of the century, became his student after many years of persuasion. So why did he agree so willingly? However, the guy has an idea about this. Smiling, the young man remembers himself during the battle with the gardener. During their duel, Duke most likely saw potential that surpassed Andre's abilities, and the knight should have a keen eye for this. Duke, smiling happily, holds out his hand. He asks what the young man himself thinks about this and offers to guess why this happened. The guy, kneeling, suggests that he is the genius of their family. Clutching his head, Duke says that he is simply shocked by the young man's self-confidence. Before us is Rena Tyrann. The knight laughs and then says that if that were the case, he would have taken the girl from the Tyrann family. The man says that he liked the guy's tenacity. To reach the level of the red or black knight, talent alone is not enough. We see flowers on a green lawn again. Now we see a foot. Duke says that because talented fighters never face real problems, they break down in the face of adversity. We see a boot print with crushed flowers inside. We see a young man's face. He understands that his mentor is absolutely right. We see several knights. The most famous geniuses, who were predicted to be at least red knights, not only do not achieve this title, but also remain blue knights for the rest of their lives. Duke gets up from the couch and offers to stop the idle chatter. He tells the boy to follow him to the first lesson. We see a dormitory building. Zeke happily agrees to fulfill the man's request. In front of us is a huge arena surrounded by stands. It is reported that this is the gym of the Western Greenhouse. Zeke could not even guess that there was a gym under the greenhouse. The boy walks forward. He does not understand what Duke has planned. He brought him here in a hurry, but 3 hours have passed since they got here. The gardener looks at his student in amazement. He orders him to stop. The boy asks again if he really should do that. Duke says that he wants to ask the boy something. The hero raises his left hand and asks what the master wants to know. Duke appears behind the boy and says that it is nothing special. The mentor grabs the student's hand. Zeke strikes and frees his hand. The boy jumps back and takes a fighting stance. The gardener looks at his hand in amazement. Duke looks at the student and asks if he has any problems checking the pulse. Zeke looks at the knight warily. He says that he understood from the very beginning that something was wrong with the boy. The man recalls some moments from previous meetings with the hero. He states that when they fought in the ward, when they dueled in the greenhouse, and even after the hero ran 500 laps, he did not feel a drop of his aura, and now he prevented him from checking his pulse. Duke calls the hero a kid and asks if he really does not know how to use aura. The guy looks at his mentor in amazement. Zeke and Duke are in the gym. The knight says that he saw the bronze statue. The man stands with his hands in his pockets. He states that the commotion back then was due to an unprecedented golden glow. We see the interlocutor's legs opposite each other. The knight, smiling broadly, leans towards the student who has turned away. He asks why, if this is true, he does not allow his pulse to be checked. The hero looks warily at his mentor. We see the knight's face. Zeke understands that Duke does not suspect him. A Draker who can't control his aura is something out of the ordinary, but he's probably just curious. The young man clenches his fist and looks down. He's lucky it's Duke in front of him. If the hero can get Graham, no one will be suspicious of his aura, so until then he just needs to be careful. There's no need to lie anymore, unlike the hero's previous life, where he was the first loser awakened in the family. The boy takes off his glove and declares that the master is right. The activation of the mana reflection skill is announced. The knight looks around the room in surprise, where discharges of energy begin to sparkle. Zeke declares that he has the ability to reflect mana, which proves his pureblood status, but for some reason he can't use aura. The young man extends his hand to the astonished knight. He thinks that such a truth will cover up his lie. Zeke looks down, embarrassed. He apologizes for not telling him about it earlier, because if it turns out that Draker can't use the aura, he'll be thrown out of here, and that's really scary. Zeke is crying. He thinks that such a show should work 100%. We see the hands of the mentor and the student. Duke looks at the guy in surprise. He asks the master what he managed to find out. We see the left eye of the knight. Zeke looks at his teacher a little scared. He thinks that the boy harbors a grudge that doesn't match his age, but apparently he's just a child in front of him. The strange thing is that the aura is not felt at all, despite the fact that he has successfully awakened. The knight turns away from the guy and looks to his left. Zeke looks at the man warily. He thinks that all of this is true. Even after checking his pulse, Duke cannot be sure how true the blessing ritual was. We see the falling pieces of the puzzle. Duke rubs his chin with his finger. The mentor presses on the puzzle piece located on the hero's heart. Zeke thinks that even if it is true that he could not awaken with an aura, Duke himself will find a reason to deny everything. The knight states that most likely, the matter is that Zeke is fickle. The man places his hand on the hero's shoulder. The youth closes his eyes. One would expect Duke to come to the conclusion that he is fickle. If you do not know the concept of classes, it is quite natural to think so. We see several examples of weapons. The hero asks the mentor what they are. He replies that this term is used to describe people with abnormal abilities. For example, it could be the ability to use aura and mana at the same time. In front of us is a naked knight with a sword in his hand and a mage with a purple ball hanging in front of him. Duke says that it could also be the ability to see into the future. To be honest, non-permanent abilities are not treated very well, so it is better for the boy not to tell anyone about it. Zeke runs after the knight. He asks why the master considers him non-permanent. Duke answers that it is because of the boy's insane stamina and his ability to recover. No matter what the damage, healing internal wounds takes time. We see the knight from the side. He says that his student, however, recovers almost instantly. He is sure that this takes a lot of energy. The teacher asks the boy what, in his opinion, is its source. Zeke suggests that it is aura. The knight says that since it is constantly spent on stamina and healing, almost none remains for perception. But this is only his hypothesis. Zeke looks at the teacher in surprise. It seems plausible to him. The boy continues to run after the mentor. He asks if he will ever be able to use aura. After all, if not, then he will not be able to live up to the master's expectations. The Duke laughs and states that the young man should not think about it. Smiling, he looks over his shoulder at the hero. Duke states that his special storm art does not use aura. Zeke and Duke stand in the middle of a circular area. The teacher states that, in fact, the special art is a special technique created by the knight himself, who has achieved great heights. Usually, this skill is used to kill dragons, so it would be more correct to use aura, but his storm art uses his trained body. The hero sits down on the floor in front of the mentor. He states that he will now show everything. The boy needs to look closely. We see some cracks. Zeke looks to his left in surprise. There are many white marks around him. The mentor appears in front of the boy in his tattered clothes. Duke looks at the boy and asks if he noticed anything. Zeke wonders if the knight will mind if he repeats all this. The teacher and student stand opposite each other. The Duke asks if the boy doesn't mind if he doesn't repeat what he just showed. The boy says that what he's seen is enough. The Duke laughs and says that the boy's self-confidence is at least black rank. He asks him to get down to business. Zeke bends his knees slightly. We see his concentrated gaze. In front of us is a footprint. White footprints are now visible around the bewildered mentor. The hero's eyes are shining. We see many footprints on the training ground. Now, repeating the knight's movements, the hero can see what he hadn't noticed before. Obviously, these steps were made as if he were fighting someone, some to attack, others to dodge. He sees where the knight shortened the distance and where he increased it. There is a specific goal behind each step. Zeke abruptly stops in front of his mentor. The mentor cannot believe what he sees. The Duke remembers what Zeke looked like just recently. It's not that he didn't have talent a week ago, but he certainly wasn't that good. What happened this week? The hero looks down sadly, thinking that there's a big difference in their steps. Duke remembers the hero kneeling in front of him. He realizes that the boy's progress is incredible. He sees a perfect student in front of him. Zeke looks at the teacher with pride. He asks if this is enough to gain the confidence of a black rank. Duke thinks that if the boy would stop acting so arrogantly, he would be priceless. He grabs the boy by the neck and starts to strangle him. The knight calls the student an asshole and says that just recently he was sniveling, and now he looks like a pompous fool. The boy begs him not to tell anyone about this. Duke says that everything depends on his behavior. Zeke asks who this knight is who has no bones in his tongue. In front of us is a magnificent white building. It is reported that this is the Academy's cafeteria. We see a plate filled with food. The hero, sitting at the table, eats greedily. He thinks that a month has passed since Duke started training him, and he still eats like crazy because of all this training. The hero tries to chew what he stuffed into his mouth. Andre approaches the guy and asks if Zeke Draker would like to spend some time with him. The young man wonders what he is doing here. Without letting go of his fork and knife, Zeke says that he is a little busy, but if the young man is satisfied with communication here, he will be happy to talk. Andre agrees. He puts his hand on the table and asks how the hero managed to convince Sir Dexter. Zeke, continuing to eat, is surprised that he is being asked so directly. The young man, a sword visible behind his back, smiles. He understands that since Andre has not yet become the Black Knight's apprentice, the news that the hero has succeeded has alarmed him a little. Zeke, whose mouth is full of food, says that, frankly, he did nothing of the sort. Dexter chose him himself. Andre looks at the hero with hatred. Zeke raises his knife. Andre asks if the purebred played a role here. The hero, with his mouth full, asks again in surprise. We see an empty plate in front of him. Zeke says that his interlocutor has a real inferiority complex. In front of us is the right side of Andre's face. His hands, clad in gauntlets, are shaking. The guy asks if this is all the cadet wants to say. He replies that this is not even half of it. Zeke wipes his mouth with a napkin. He says that even though Dexter was initially interested in him because of his pedigree, this man is not the type to choose an apprentice for such a simple reason. The hero looks askance at his interlocutor. He says that he managed to intrigue the knight and then use the intrigue to become his student, and this is evidence of his abilities. The hero throws the napkin on the floor. He suggests that the interlocutor not to indulge his ego with an inferiority complex in vain, but to make at least a little effort. Zeke, holding a tray in his hands, towers over the blonde sitting in front of him. In front of us is the already familiar training ground, namely the arena of the Western Greenhouse. Zeke and Duke are watching the young man training. The student looks at the knight and asks what happened to this guy. Duke replies that he is also very interested. He has no idea what came over him. Andre is breathing heavily. Duke watches the young man running along the track. The knight tells the hero that Andre begged him to take him even as a servant. The guy said that he was ready to do anything to be near him. To this the mentor replied that he would take the young man if he could run 300 laps without an aura. Zeke could not believe what he had heard. Duke, his mouth twisted, rubbed the back of his head. He called the running boy a stubborn asshole. Zeke smiled. Before, he had thought that Andre was just a smug cretin. Sweat was running down the young man's face. The hero thought that perhaps this man had a very strong character. In front of us was a wooden trash can. A huge square was filled with dense rows of warriors. We could hear voices ringing out above it. What was going on? Why were all the students gathered? Idiot, how could you forget? The leader was coming today. We saw horses. They were pulling a carriage with a coat of arms with 2 crossed swords visible on the roof. The young man, putting his hand to his mouth, shouted loudly that the leader had arrived. Howard Draker, adjusting his mustache, ordered everyone to get ready. The cadets shouted that they understood. The procession approaches the old man. One of the knights opens the carriage door. A blond man's head appears. He declares that he is glad to see Howard Draker again. The pot-bellied old man bows respectfully and greets the head of House Draker. The knights raise their swords and kneel. The hands of the clock approach 12. Now they both point straight up. We see a piece of a collar, and now a black hand. The head of House Draker places his hand on Howard's shoulder and says that he has done a great job, as always. The old man replies that it is nothing compared to what his guest is doing. The young man looks at the old man and declares that he is the only one who truly understands this. It is announced that before us is Arthur Draker, head of the 3rd transcendental family of Draker Dragonslayers. Howard, still bowing, declares that the sun is very hot today. He suggests that his guest leave. The cadets, who see the figure of the important guest from afar, are animatedly discussing his arrival. Arthur raises his hand. He turns to the lined-up warriors and, spreading his arms out to the sides, addresses them. Arthur shouts that the young Dragonslayers are the hope and future of Draker. The young people look at the man with admiration. He urges them to train long and hard, since their development is the development of Draker. The man's yellow eyes attract attention. The cadets stand on one knee, their heads down. They make it clear that they understand the wish expressed by the leader. Arthur extends his hand to the old man and declares that they can now go. He also makes it clear that he understands the guest. In front of us are closed doors. The hero says that he, Zeke Draker, with all due respect greets the leader of the knights and the keeper of the name of Dragonslayers. Standing behind the important guest, the guy bows. The head of the house turns to the boy with a smile and says that no one greets like that anymore. He says that everything is fine and the boy can sit down. Arthur knows that Zeke likes tea, so he has prepared something. The man hopes that the boy will like it. We see cakes and other delicacies. Zeke thanks the distinguished guest. He is sitting on the sofa with a worried expression on his face. The boy tries to understand whether this man was even informed about the food that he likes. The hero's face is reflected in the cup. There were rumors once that even the emperor had not seen some of the joys of life, but there is nothing that the representatives of the Draker family have not seen. Now this does not seem like an exaggeration at all. Arthur, holding a cup of tea, says that he called the boy because he learned that the Duke had taken an apprentice. The hero, who has one eye covered, thinks that the head of the house is also very straightforward. The boy says that the Duke has done him a great favor. Arthur squints and confirms that this is indeed the case. In front of us is a bird cage with an open door. The man declares that he has no idea what the boy's goal is, but if he continues to study with Duke, he can become the strongest man on the continent. In front of us is the left side of the man's face. A feather falls outside the open window. Zeke declares that he will become the strongest of all in order to live freely. An empty cup lands on the saucer. Smiling, the hero looks at the man and declares that this is his goal. The young man, smiling, looks at his high-born interlocutor. He holds the cup out to the table and declares that in this case the young man will surpass even himself. Sweat or tears are running down the hero's face. We see the young man's neck. He realizes that it looks like an astral sword. The room in which the interlocutors are sitting is filled with powerful streams of blue energy. The astral sword is said to grant power over all living things within its radius, making it the pinnacle of aura usage, available only to Black Knights. Zeke smiles. Large drops continue to roll down his cheeks. Arthur looks at the young man with some unnatural gaze. The hero clenches his fist and knocks over the cup. It seems that the streams of energy filling the room are getting stronger. The young man looks at his interlocutor and says that, of course, this is the most interesting thing he has heard in recent years. He thinks that in front of him is the head of the Draker family and a real Black Knight. Arthur runs his hand under the hem of his suit. He says that he has come to support the academy as a whole and the hero in particular, but does not think that this will be enough. He places something on the table in front of the hero. He thought that Duke was incredibly strong, but now in front of him is a character of a completely different level. We see a card with a coat of arms. Arthur says that this is a gift to the boy for becoming Duke's student. It is a black card. The boy asks again, amazed. Arthur says that the hero probably already knows what it is. We see the item the boy received up close. Zeke knows that it is a credit card that is given only to a select few. He never expected to see it with his own eyes. It provides incredible benefits, even just being in someone's hands, but it doesn't end there. Raising his left hand, Arthur states that the card is registered in their names so the boy can use it freely. The hero bows and thanks his benefactor. He promises to use it only when absolutely necessary. Zeke is reflected in the black card he just received. The hero thinks that Arthur is just pretending to care about him. However, his intentions are too obvious. After using the credit card, a corresponding record remains, and he just wants to keep an eye on what the boy does. But it is better this way than if Arthur resorts to the help of the Black Combat Squad. For now, in his opinion, the hero does not pose a threat. Arthur sits with his fingers crossed in front of him. He says that he will not distract the hero any longer, as he is sure that the hero is busy training to become the strongest on the continent. The man waves his hand and declares that the boy can go. Zeke bows and tells the head of the Draker house that he understands. The hero closes the door behind him. He walks down the hallway. We see 2 cups. Someone sighs in relief. In front of us is the profile of the head of the Draker house. Duke stands behind him. He says that the man is simply disgusting. Arthur asks why the Black Knight is so angry. The gardener, glaring at his interlocutor, asks why he suddenly started acting like a daddy when he has neglected his child all this time. Arthur looks at Duke, closing one eye, and declares that he, as the head of the family, has no choice. This is not to mention that the knight's words are pure slander. Taking a very strange position on the sofa, Duke laughs and says that in this case the other person should take him away from here. Arthur again runs his hand under the hem of his suit. He says that Duke is the only one he can talk to calmly. A bottle appears in the head of the house's hand. He offers to drink while talking. Duke smiles happily. He recognizes a wonderful drink called Dragon's Breath. The knight praises the man for his excellent taste in good booze. There is a bottle and a full glass on the table. Arthur asks the other person if he is aware that the atmosphere on the continent has been rather strange lately. The other person states that he was locked up in the academy and simply could not know about it. Duke and Arthur clink glasses. The latter states that the gardener has eyes and ears everywhere. Rubbing his chin, Duke calls the other person a viper since he asks, although he probably knows the answer. There are 2 windows in front of us. Arthur claims that the Emperor has gone mad trying to gain immortality and is searching for its secret all over the continent. He asks Duke if he thinks it is possible. The gardener frowns at his interlocutor and says that he would be glad if it were so, but magic can only rejuvenate but not grant immortality. Arthur brings a glass to his mouth. He says that he thinks exactly the same, but what if the relic he is looking for is somehow connected to an ancient dragon? Duke imagines this monster. He asks again in amazement. In front of us is a corridor. We hear phrases coming from behind the door. Seriously, eternal youth can be obtained with the help of magic, but immortality never. The hero stands leaning against the wall. It seems that he is eavesdropping. We see waves of energy spreading around him. It is reported that he really does use the eavesdropping artifact. The Duke and Arthur are talking, sitting at the table. One of them asks if the relic of an ancient dragon can grant immortality. The second replies that this is, of course, possible. Duke holds out his hand towards his interlocutor, holding a glass. The gardener says that he will never believe it if the head of the Draker house says that he was able to find out the location of this relic. He replies that, judging by the report of the Black Stage, it is most likely located on the territory of the northern continent. Duke takes a sip from the glass and thoughtfully repeats the name of the geographical object. Looking at the interlocutor sitting in a huge chair, he asks if this information has reached the Empire. Arthur replies that not yet, but it is only a matter of time. Duke remembers the Emperor, whose back we see. The Black Knight says that he remembered the past. This crazy scoundrel unleashed a war only after ascending the throne, supposedly with the goal of uniting the continent. Arthur says that if the relic could even remotely grant immortality. Duke interrupts him. He thought that the Emperor had already given up on this ridiculous dream, but apparently this is not so. The gardener says that if the relic could give immortality. Arthur finishes the sentence for him, stating that the continent would be engulfed in flames again. The head of the Draker house, smiling, holds a glass of drink in his hand. In front of us is an empty chair. Arthur says that because of such an important matter, he wanted to personally go north. The Duke, perplexed, says that if Arthur leaves his place, the Emperor will begin to act more recklessly. The head of the Draker house, who has a glass in his hand, says that this is why he came to his interlocutor. The latter calls the man a cunning bastard. The interlocutors clink glasses. We see the hero again. He hears the continuation of the conversation. Arthur says that he can only rely on the Duke. He replies that the head of the house always gives him the most difficult tasks. Zeke kneels down and rests his hand on the floor. Sweat is running down his cheeks. The guy thinks that he has been using the artifact for too long. After absorbing the heart of Bahamut, he can't escape the side effects. We see an artifact topped with a dragon's head, and many images from the past pop up in the hero's memory. Zeke thinks about the ancient dragon. The statue he was able to get before he regressed is a relic of the ancient dragon. The voice that sounded in his head right before his death and the system message he saw after the recession. Everything fell into place. He stole a relic that could fulfill the Emperor's wish, so he mobilized the hunting dogs, an elite squad that was supposed to capture him. At that moment, the hero was consumed by a thirst for revenge, and he didn't care what kind of statue it was, but now he has found a clue. The administrator system that sent him to the past is a function of the ancient dragon. But who created something like this and why? Zeke, leaning on the wall, sighs heavily. He has many questions left. Duke and Arthur say goodbye to each other. One of them says that they had a good time. The gardener says that he will immediately begin to carry out the task given to him by the head of the Draker house. He replies that he is counting on the man. Duke and Arthur separate. Arthur approaches the door. He stands in front of it. The man looks at the door handles. We see the face of this character. It seems that he feels something. Zeke holds the artifact he received in his hands. He ponders that if this is really the relic that the Emperor was looking for, then how is returning to the past connected with eternal youth and immortality? We see the left eye of the young man. Arthur stands in the doorway. He examines the huge room. Zeke hides in the bushes, and Arthur tries to understand whether he imagined something. The hero, who has only one eye open, stands leaning on his sword. He turns to Decker and reminds him that he asked not to disturb him while he is studying in the hall. The servant apologizes to the young master and says that a fellow student has come to see him. Decker asks if he should tell him that Zeke is busy. The young man, suspecting that it is Rena, looks at the servant in surprise. He thinks that he has no friends in the academy. The young man tells the servant to let the visitor in. The guest is kneeling in front of the hero. He thinks that he would never have thought that it would be Liam Stone. He does not understand why he should consider this guy a friend. Liam humbly asks the hero to accept him. Zeke sighs tiredly and thinks that he should have just passed by then. The young man stands in front of the kneeling cadet and asks if he wants to say that he is ready to be his subordinate. Liam calls him master and declares that he will give himself completely to the hero. Zeke asks what to do about Jaken. Liam clenches his fist. He says that he was thrown out. The boy looks up and looks at the hero pleadingly. He says that he wants to get to Valhalla no matter what. Zeke looks at the cadet thoughtfully. He thinks that the same thing happened in his past life. The guy does not understand why Liam is so obsessed with this Valhalla. The cadet continues to beg the hero. Zeke raises his right hand. He asks if he is an idiot. The guy should have gone to the Tyrann or Zimon's family, not to him. Zeke waves his hand and steps away, stating that no family supports him. He takes the sword in his hand and adds that this is exactly why he cannot help the guy get to Valhalla. The hero's face is reflected in the blade of the sword. He asks the young man how he can even trust him. He could very well be a spy sent by Jaken. Liam is on his knees. He takes a dagger out of its sheath. The guy lifts the weapon. Liam cuts off his ear. We see a splatter of blood. The guy is holding a bloody dagger in his hands. He states that the hero's doubts are understandable, but he will prove that he is telling the truth. If Zeke wants him to shut up, he will simply cut out his tongue. Liam continues to mutilate himself. He states that if the hero wants him to limp, he will cut off his shin. The young man states that he entrusts his life to the master. Zeke looks at the cadet in amazement. He remembers the boy with the cut-off ear. He said then that instead of taking his worthless life, he would limit himself to the ear. Sweat, tears, and drool are running down Liam's face. He begs the hero to accept him. The boy says that he wants to become stronger than everyone. In front of us are the treetops of a night forest. We see a dark silhouette with a club in his hands. Zeke remembers how he himself said the same words. We see the right side of the young man's face. He asks the master to teach him. Liam is kneeling behind the hero. He continues to beg and plead. In front of us is a sword. It flies into the kneeling cadet and lands behind him. Zeke points at the young man. He states that if he can withstand at least one move during the attack, he will accept it. Liam, smiling, thanks the boy. The young men are standing on a rectangular training ground. The hero asks if Liam has fully recovered before coming here. He replies that he has. Purple streams rise from his suit. Liam thinks that most likely, it will be quite easy to withstand one move, since he also uses Draker's aura. A yellow dragon eye is visible behind the hero. Liam tries to figure out if he and Zeke are really the same age. The cadet looks at the hero with concern. He pulls out his sword, but everything is blurry before his eyes. The boy can hardly breathe. Liam holds the hilt of the weapon with both hands. He raises the sword above his head and rushes forward. The opponent's blades collide. We see the blade of the sword. Gray and yellow streams swirl around it. The weapon flies high into the air. It falls between the two opponents. The cadet, whose head is bandaged, is sitting on the floor. Zeke asks if this is really all that Liam Stone can do. The hero looks at the young man with sympathy and says that he is very sorry. Liam is sitting on the floor in front of the sword-wielding hero. Zeke says that he respects the boy's determination, but it would be better for him to abandon the idea of entering Valhalla. We see the sword sticking out of the floor. Liam gets to his feet and calls out to the hero. Zeke, who has a sword on his shoulder, stares at the cadet. He thinks that perhaps Jaken really did abandon him. But if he hadn't been that bastard servant, a member of one of the distant branches might not have made it to the cradle. Even the hero, the heir apparent, was expelled from that academy, so it wouldn't be surprising if Liam was expelled right now. He has every reason to be worried. Zeke stares at the cadet. Liam grabs onto the boy's leg. He's not sure that the boy should hold onto his dream so tightly. We see what Liam looked like in the hero's past life. Back then, he was expelled from the academy and his knightly order fell apart. Nevertheless, he managed to reach the Scarlet Realm and earn the nickname of the King of Mercenaries. Streams of tears flow from the cadet's eyes. He continues to beg the hero to give him another chance. Zeke frowns at the young man. The hero understands that he's simply not going to give up. He says that he will give the cadet one last chance. Liam looks in shock at the hero's pants, which are right in front of his eyes. Zeke, holding a sword, states that he has one condition. We see the lower half of the young man's face. He repeats the cadet's words that if he has to become mute, he will cut off his tongue, and if he has to become lame, he will cut off his ankle. Liam has a hand on his shoulder. Zeke approaches the young man closely and states that in this case, he must cut off his right hand. Liam looks at the hero in amazement. Liam asks if the young man really thinks his hand is so valuable. In front of us is the right side of the cadet's face. Zeke sits in front of the boy with a thoughtful look. He realizes that losing his right hand is practically an offer to give up the life of a swordsman. No sane person would ever accept this offer. The hero turns away from his interlocutor and states that he needs to train hard. If he cannot part with his hand, he must leave. Zeke takes a fighting stance, and Liam rises to his feet behind him. We see the hero's eye. The guy doesn't understand why the cadet is so desperate, but he mentally asks him not to be too disappointed in this life. Liam stands with his hands down. The hero thinks that even if he doesn't get to Valhalla, he can still reach the Scarlet Realm. In front of us is the tip of the sword. Zeke looks at the cadet in amazement. He raises the weapon above his head and is about to cut off his right hand. The hero clenches his teeth from the tension. He calls the guy crazy. In front of us is the cadet's profile. We see falling drops. Zeke swings and knocks the weapon out of the enemy's hands with his blade. The lower part of the sword flies off, leaving marks on the surface of the training ground. Liam looks at the hero in amazement. He grabs him by the collar. Zeke pulls the young man towards him and calls him a crazy bastard. The hero asks what would have happened if he had changed his mind after Liam cut off his hand. The cadet looks at the young man sadly. He frowns back. Liam says that it's because he could have lost something more important than his arm. Zeke hits the boy in the chest and turns away from him. He says that if he does something so idiotic again, he will kick him out no matter how loyal he is. The hero asks him to remember this firmly. A smile appears on the cadet's face. He seems to understand what this means. In front of us is the academy dormitory building. The hero shouts at Liam to hurry. If he has an earless subordinate, they will start thinking all sorts of nasty things about him. Liam happily shouts that he understood his master perfectly. In a spacious, luxurious hall, two young men are sitting at a table. One of them is holding his ear. Liam looks around and points at something with his finger. He asks if he can really use such a good potion. Zeke, who is calmly drinking tea, says that he is investing in the value of his subordinate, so there is no need to worry about it at all. The hero puts his cup down on the saucer. He folds his hands in front of him and asks what was that. Liam looks at his master tensely. He, clarifying the question, asks to answer what could be more important than the right hand, or rather, even the whole life of a young man. We see the cadet's folded hands. He says that it is all about his mother. The young man looks down sadly. He says that a few days after Jaken abandoned him, he received news that his mother had come down with a high fever. Fortunately, the fever quickly passed, but her body is covered in red spots that resemble roses, and she is getting weaker day by day. We see the hero's left eye. Leaning on the table, Liam lowers his head. He says that the village healers do not even know the name of this disease. The hero asks in surprise if this is the reason why the boy wants to enter Valhalla. He answers that this is exactly the case. The medical care provided to Valhalla students and their families is considered to be one of the best on the entire continent. Zeke, who is holding a fountain pen, rubs his nose. He is about to write something. The hero writes, repeating the words about red spots resembling roses. We see a paper with writing. Hot flashes and red spots resembling roses all over the body are symptoms of the red blossom disease, which has spread across the central part of the continent for 5 years. We see a sick man with characteristic symptoms, and then a pile of skulls. The disease turned out to be highly contagious and deadly. It took countless lives. However, after some time, an effective treatment was developed, which put an end to the epidemic. We see a hand with a piece of paper. The hero hands the page to the amazed young man. Zeke declares that this is a recipe for a medicine that will help cure his mother's illness. It is not that difficult to make, so even a village healer can handle it. Liam, who has already taken the recipe, looks at his master in amazement. He thanks the hero and asks how he knows about the disease that doctors do not even know what to call it yet. We see two black silhouettes, and then a tall tower. The brilliant alchemist brothers Al and Jeff developed a medicine that saved the devastated central part of the continent. However, the greedy alchemist guild tried to make huge money on their invention. When the brothers found out about this, they revealed the recipe to ordinary people. This led to the fact that even such simple mercenaries as the hero found out about it. Zeke smiles and tells his comrade that he will limit himself to the phrase that he has an alchemist friend who is well versed in his business. We see the interlocutors sitting from above. The hero says that now that the guy has the recipe for the medicine, he does not need to enter Valhalla or even remain his subordinate. Liam stands up and says that this will never happen. The guy remembers how he maimed himself. He says that he has already given his life to the hero. We see a clenched fist. The guy gets down on one knee and declares that he swears to serve the hero faithfully for the rest of his life. Zeke, smiling, brings a cup to his lips. He recognizes the oath of allegiance. The fact that he will have the king of mercenaries under his command looks very promising. In front of us is a luxurious lamp. The hero shouts to his subordinate that if he lags behind, he will simply leave him. Liam loudly replies that he understood the words of his master. The sun is shining over the city. In front of us is a window. The one sitting behind it asks what is the matter. In front of us is Owen Zimmons. He bows. It turns out that the previous question was addressed specifically to him. Howard Draker is sitting at the table opposite the young man. The young man greets the director of the academy, after which he says that he has a proposal. How about making the exam harder this semester? Howard touches his mustache. He asks why that is necessary. Owen closes his eyes and states that this may seem like a subjective assessment, but this year's freshmen are incredibly skilled. They include members of very famous families and even two pure-blooded awakened. There is a parrot cage next to the principal's desk. Owen states that if the exam is as easy as last year's, it will prevent an objective assessment of the student's abilities. Howard hums thoughtfully, then says that he thinks the idea is worth considering. He praises the boy as a worthy heir to the Zimmons family. The old man promises to think it over carefully. The cadet bows low and thanks the director. In front of us is a door. Howard sighs heavily. We see him from behind the window. The director thinks that blood really never lies. Now we see what Howard sees from his office. The old man thinks that the boy's thoughts turned out to be strikingly similar to those that are spinning in his head. Liam, under the supervision of the hero, trains with a sword. Zeke, smiling, looks at his student. Howard thinks that, given the potential dangers that await them ahead, it would be better to get rid of them in the bud. In front of us are forested mountains. It is reported that the dungeon exam has begun, which is the last one of the semester of training. We see a spacious square where cadets have gathered, armed with swords. The dungeon exploration exam is a unique assessment test of the Draker Academy, when teams of 2 people must escape from the dungeon in a certain amount of time. The difficulty of the dungeons that are randomly given to each team varies greatly, and is a key characteristic. The hero and Liam are standing next to each other. Zeke asks if the guy is nervous. He replies that he is a little. The hero smiles. He says that it is natural. Too much anxiety provokes mistakes, and if you are not nervous at all, you can become overconfident. The right amount of anxiety prevents both. In front of us is Rena, who is stretching her neck. The examiner calls the next pair, Zeke Draker and Liam Stone. The young men calmly walk towards a dark passage. The heroes call his comrade to follow him. He replies that he understands his master. We see a hand in a black glove. Its owner asks the guys to stop. He points his thumb over his shoulder and declares that the cadets are going in the wrong direction. The young man points to the passage they need to go into. We see the hero's eyes. The teacher looks sternly at the guys and asks why they are just standing there. They need to get inside quickly. Zeke sighs tiredly, declaring that he will readily carry out this order. The hero heads to the passage indicated to him. The goal of the exam is to get out within a certain time. Zeke and Liam go down the stairs. The countdown begins as soon as the squad enters the tunnel. We see a clock. All teams are given exactly 96 hours. General combat skills are also assessed. We see 2 young people fighting monsters. Bonus points can be earned if you bring the heads of destroyed monsters to the surface. However, the most important factor is leaving the dungeon. The hero, with a lantern in hand, walks in front of his comrade. If you do not appear on the surface in time, the exam is considered failed. In front of us are a staircase and an arched passage. The hero states that they have already eaten, so Liam can rest a little. He says that the hero himself set up camp and prepared food. He is the one who should rest first. Zeke replies that he can go without sleep for several days, so his companion should not worry. Liam says that he will go to bed first then, if the hero does not object. We see a table and a pot next to the tent. Zeke says that he will wake the guy if something happens. The hero is sitting by the fire next to the tent. He looks at his watch. 16 hours have passed since they entered the dungeon. The hero trained non-stop for 3 days before the exam, so he has not slept for about 90 hours. The young man immerses himself in memories and sees the Duke and how he was kneeling. Zeke knows that endless stamina gets rid of physical fatigue, but not mental. In a dungeon where you never know what will happen, it is better to minimize risks as much as possible. We see original bells on a string. The hero looks at the fire. He expects that when Liam wakes up, they will switch roles. We see a bell of a slightly different design. The young man's eyes close. The bell hangs next to the column of the ancient building. Now we see a flag in front of us. The fortress walls are covered with snow. We see someone's hand and hair. In front of us is a strange figure with long hair and a ringing bell. The hero opens his eyes in fear. He is still sitting in front of the fire. Zeke rubs his eyes. He curses, realizing that he had this dream again. A yellow eye is visible under the young man's fingers. Zeke thinks that he definitely heard the bell. We see that a rope is stretched across the entrance to the dungeon. The young man takes a thermos and puts out the fire. The hero grabs his sword. He shouts to his comrade to wake up as enemies are approaching. Zeke says that he will check the surroundings and Liam should not light the fire or use other sources of light. The cadet replies that he understands his master. The guy looks anxiously to his left. He thinks it is risky to use the dragon eye during the exam, which lasts 4 days. It is better to wait until his eyes get used to the darkness. We see the lower part of the young man's face. He smells sulfur and seems to understand who he will have to face. In front of us are terrifying monsters whose bodies burn with a hot flame. Creatures that smell of sulfur and hunt in packs, monsters of the 3rd danger class, hellhounds. Zeke, gritting his teeth, holds the sword with both hands. In his previous life, Rena brought orcs during this exam, but he never thought that hellhounds would be here. The young man looks to his left. He understands that something is wrong here. Even the leader of a pack of hellhounds should not weigh more than a few hundred kilograms. The tip of a sword appears from behind the wall. The young man looks at the passage, which is reflected in the blade. He realizes that, judging by the vibrations he feels, the monsters weigh at least tens of tons. Are these some kind of mutants? Zeke looks at something in fear. He curses. We see fragments of a stone wall and a young man flying back, still holding his sword in his hands. The weapon scrapes along the ground. Liam runs up to the hero from behind, asking if everything is alright with his master. Zeke grinds his teeth in rage. He remembers the Zimmons and calls them bastards. One could guess that they are up to something behind his back. We see a terrible face emitting streams of yellow energy. Now in front of us is a hand holding the head of a slain monster. The huge monster throws aside the head of the hellhound and stretches out a club towards the young men standing in front of him. Zeke understands that the Zimmons have gone to extreme measures to kill him. Liam, who is standing behind his commander, recognizes the troll. Before us is a very unpleasant monster with a long nose and sharp fangs. It really is a troll, a monster of the 1st danger class which can easily destroy hellhounds and orcs. Troll blood is the main ingredient in healing potions, and these monsters have an incredible ability to recover. Zeke leans on his sword and looks at his comrade. He steps forward and declares that he will act as bait. While he distracts the monster, his master must hide to save his life. Zeke smiles. He raises his left hand and tells Liam to stop saying such sentimental things. No master would abandon his subordinates. Zeke and Liam stand with their backs to each other. The hero says that his comrade should not be offended by him. He completely trusts what the guy does, and he is not weak at all. Zeke, smiling, says that he will support the guy so he can do whatever he wants. Liam smiles happily. He sincerely thanks his master. Both young men rush to attack their opponent. The troll is hit with many powerful blows from both sides. The hero thinks that they are doing quite well. In front of us is someone's eye. We see the monster's hand. The hero thinks that his ally's actions are truly impressive. He managed to cut through the troll's thick skin and hit the tendons right on the bone. I wonder if Liam has been studying monsters. The troll rests his hand on the ground. Liam looks at the giant spikes approaching him in fear. Zeke lands behind him, and we realize that he has just protected his ally. The troll falls to one knee in front of the two guys. Liam turns around in fear and apologizes to his master. Zeke, smiling, declares that everything is fine. For his first real battle, the guy is doing quite well. Striking at the relatively soft tendons was an excellent choice, but he underestimated the troll's ability to regenerate. The monster looks at the stump of his giant club in surprise. The hero explains to his ally that small scratches on the troll heal instantly. Unless the striking power is very high, it will never catch up with the monster's regeneration speed. The troll raises his right hand. Zeke says that his ally is unlikely to cope with this monster. Zeke, looking determinedly at the enemy, declares that he will finish him off. That's how this video ends. If you have sat through to the end, please don't forget to press the subscribe button and leave feedback. See you in the next video.